persuade the government to politically sponsored carnage in a Median community. Number 8, Charles Akinwa, petition against lawful dismissal from service, an appeal for intervention on the refusal of the Nigerian Navy to reinstate him back to service since 1997 to date. And finally, number 9, Dr. E.I. Monyigesu, Federal College of Agriculture, Akure, a call for just intervention. Mr. President, may I seek the indulgence of the Senate for me to officially lay this next petition for official referral to the relevant committee of the Senate.
Thank you very much, Chairman. Is any of them seeking judicial remedy?
Mr. President, none of them is seeking judicial remedy.
You can lay the petitions. The petitions are hereby referred to the Senate Committee on Ethics, Privileges, and Public Petitions to report within 4 weeks. Leader of the Senate. Point of order, Senator Ike Ekweramadu.
Thank you, Mr. President. Very distinguished colleagues. I come under orders 42 and 52. With your permission, may I read, sir?
Go ahead.
The matter for discussion. The matter for discussion shall, if possible, be referred to the President of the Senate before commencement of the day's sitting, and the President of the Senate shall refuse to allow the claim unless he is satisfied that the matter is definite and urgent. If the claim is allowed by the President of the Senate, and the leave of the Senate is given by at least 1/5 of all the senators, the matter shall stand over till the next legislative day. 52. Notice shall not be dispensed with in the case of a motion or in respect of any other proceeding for which notice is required, except with the consent of the President of the Senate and the general assent of the senators present. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, I have a motion regarding the rising case of unemployment. I'm aware there has been a lot of pressure on all of us, including yourself, and I believe it is time for us as a Senate to show concern about this issue and be able to make suggestions on the way forward. So if I have your permission, I'll quickly move the motion, sir.
Yeah, you have my consent, but I need to seek the endorsement of our colleagues by at least 1/5 of senators present for you to take the motion. So I put the question. Those in favor that he takes his motion now say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Present your motion.
Very well, thank you, sir. Distinguished colleagues, I'm indeed very grateful. Escalating rate of unemployment in the country. Concerned that a large number of various levels of graduates that our high institutions are turning out yearly but cannot be absorbed by the labor market is a time bomb that is waiting to explode. Noting that a report published by the National Bureau of Statistics in 2019 stated that Nigeria's unemployment rate stood at 23.1% of the workforce in the third quarter of 2019. Further note that a statement credited to Senator Chris Ngige, Minister of Labor and Productivity, and published in Premium Times of 9th November 2019, declared that Nigeria's unemployment rate will hit 33.5% by 2020. Worried that any nation with such number of unemployed but employable youths are only sitting on a keg of gunpowder, but thought that the most pressing demand on the hands of all of us legislators and public officers is the rising number of CV and application for employment from our various constituents. Convinced that a situation where every school graduate has to queue up for a job only in government offices is an indication of the breakdown of private sector, which is the major driver of world economies. Worried that these energies and potential talents that are lying idle and wasting away are usually misdirected towards many unprofitable and harmful ventures and lifestyles. Further worried that the most active percentage of the nation's population are forcefully caged from participating in the economic development of their fatherland and contributing towards the gross domestic product by unemployment. Aware that high level of crime in any society are most related to high rate of unemployment. Further aware that unemployment is one of the major causes of the upsurge in rural-urban migration, which put pressure on facilities at urban centers. Noting that unemployment...
Acting Chief Whip.
We know that unemployment is one of the major reasons why insurgency, kidnapping, armed robbery, cyber crimes, and other vices are in increase. We recall that various intervention programs by successive governments targeted at reducing youth unemployment and eradicating its co-traveler poverty have not yielded desired results. The Senate is hereby called upon to resolve as follows. 1, to urge the federal, state, and local governments to declare emergency on the provision of employment to the youth of Nigeria. Secondly, to urge the federal government, through the Minister of National Planning, to put up a mechanism and program that will provide employment for our timid unemployed graduates in all tiers of government. Thirdly, we urge the federal, state, and local government to revitalize existing industries, build new ones, and provide a conducive and enabling environment for the private sector to build more industries. And lastly, we urge the federal government to initiate a sustainable unemployment fund for the payment of living stipends to unemployed Nigerians until such persons secure any kind of employment. As so moved.
Senator Smart Ademi, Comrade Smart Ademi.
Mr. President, I stand to support and contribute to this very important issue. Unemployment, Mr. President, is a serious national problem. It's a problem that affects every one of us here, directly or indirectly. There is no doubt that all of us seated here, we have thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of graduates roaming the streets, and when we go home, we see pressure from them. So I think this is an issue that demands that all of us take very seriously by providing solutions as to how to reduce unemployment in our country. I was just discussing with my colleague here that one of the major achievements of our government, I'm talking about the federal government, was the effort of President Muhammadu Buhari in making sure that the iron and steel complex is back into business. Iron and steel complex alone is capable of employing over 25,000 people. But today, I doubt if they have up to 500 people working at iron and steel complex at Jakarta. It was abandoned by previous administration. And I think in discussing unemployment, we must take into consideration effort that is being made by some state governments on one hand and the federal government. The iron and steel complex, when it was initiated, was supposed to have about 40,000 workers. Some few months ago, I was in iron and steel complex at Jakarta. And I want to urge my colleagues here, if any of you have the time to visit iron and steel complex, you pity the country called Nigeria. Therefore, Mr. President, there's no enough time that is allocated that we can say it's just been enough to discuss unemployment. And when you talk about unemployment, I think it goes beyond the federal government. State governments must be encouraged to look at what they can do by setting up small-scale industries. One of the strengths and power of China today was the number of small-scale enterprises that are available. Yesterday, Mr. President, I was in my house and more than 4 different banks came to me and they were telling me to fill forms and take money just because I'm back to the Senate. These are people I spoke to some months back to appeal to them to give me facility to run my business. They were not forthcoming. In essence, Mr. President, banks in Nigeria, they contributed in no small measure to the problem of unemployment in Nigeria. They refused to give facilities to small-scale industries. Of course, when they see you as a politician, Nigerian banks are easily available to you, asking to siphon public funds and give to them. But you tell them to give you money to run business. Nigerian banks will not give it to you. The graduates are roaming the street. Some of them have ideas as to how to be self-employed. But the facilities are not just there for them. There are quite a number of young enterprising Nigerians today looking at how to raise funds to run business. Even to go into agriculture, Nigerian banks are not ready to give them facility. So I think the problem is a complex problem. And we must not just look at the state and federal government alone. Let us look at the banking sector. What is happening to Nigerian banks? Nigerian banks will not give you facility. Now, if you're asking people to be self-employed, to be employed, how do they get facility to run their business? Nigerian banks have serious conditions. They will give you conditions that you cannot meet. And when they even offer you the facility, they'll be asking for 30%, 40% interest. So I think in addressing unemployment, we must not just talk about or encouraging state government and federal government to provide funding. We must look at source of facility. Funding is important. And I think it is not out of place if we look at the possibility of coming out with a blueprint, the kind of conditions that should be in place to encourage young graduates so that they can be on their own. Unemployment, Mr. President, is the problem of Nigeria.
Yeah. Senator Idigia.
Thank you, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues. I rise, Mr. President, to lend my voice to this very important subject and to thank the distinguished Excellency Ekwere Madu for again raising the issue of unemployment that has become a very serious matter in this country. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, the situation of unemployment and the plight particularly of most of our youths in this country is what I now describe as the trauma, has brought upon them the trauma of despondency, helplessness, and hopelessness. Many of these our youths are well-read, have been through tertiary institutions, have multiple certificates, and have been in the labor market, some for upward of a decade, and still counting. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, I am rising this morning to say that the government of Nigeria should declare a state of emergency on the unemployment situation in this country so that all hands will be on deck and deliberate steps must be taken to ensure that we rescue the generations of Nigerian youths that are in this state of the trauma of despondency and helplessness. And that will require that sectors like the agri sector, which has a lot of potential to generate a lot of employment opportunities, should be a situation that will attract attention at the policy level and as a deliberate policy of government. Equally important is the need to ensure that the private sector has an enabling environment to generate employment opportunities for our youths. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, I again reiterate that the nation must declare a state of emergency on the unemployment situation in the country so that we can tackle this situation once and for all. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much. Senator Ezenwai Onyewuchi.
Thank you, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues. My name is Senator Ezenwai Onyewuchi, and I represent Imo East Senatorial District of Imo State. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, let me join my colleagues that spoke earlier in commending the mover of this motion, the motion on unemployment. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, there's no doubt that unemployment today can be considered to be a monster that, if we are not careful, will consume us as a nation. I agree with the mover that if you look at the security situation in Nigeria, it can be attributed to the issue of unemployment. Most of our youth today are in a very hopeless situation, and they are ready to do anything, get involved in criminality in order to put food on their table. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, I think we should take a holistic look at the issue of unemployment. We should look at the curriculum that we have today in our schools, the graduates we are churning out. Mr. President, it is important that we give our young people skills, take them through vocational education, very importantly, so that most of them will be self-reliant. Mr. President, it is clear that the private sector cannot employ the number of people in the unemployment market. And in most nations, Mr. President, the public sector is not known to be the major employer of labor. It is the private sector. So what do we do as a nation to give incentive to the private sector, to encourage the private sector to be strong and do the needful and create the needed employment? Mr. President, it is also important as a nation that we look at the real sector, because it is the real sector that can create the jobs. When we talk about the real sector, we talk about manufacturing, we talk about agriculture. If we combine with industrialization, that is actually what will provide the jobs. If we keep exporting raw materials, that will not help us as a country in job creation. But by the time we begin to process some of the raw materials, we'll be providing jobs for our people. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, the issue of unemployment is one that must be taken very, very seriously. If not, with what we are seeing today, we are going to plunge ourselves in a situation that will be difficult for us to take control of. So, Mr. President, I want to support this motion, and I want to ask our distinguished colleagues to also support this motion so that we can give our country a direction, appropriate direction. Thank you very much.
Senator Biodun Olujimi.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues. Biodun Olujimi, Ekiti South. Mr. President, let me commend the mover of the motion and add my voice to the issue of unemployment in Nigeria. Mr. President, unemployment is a behemoth. We're just praying that it will swallow all of us up. And the reasons are very simple. They are not far-fetched. Nigeria has moved away from agriculture. Nobody wants to go back to the farm. Even those who are on the farms are just nominal farmers. They don't pay attention. They get people to do it for them. Mr. President, that is not even sufficient. Our youths have refused to imbibe vocational studies. They believe erroneously that being in that sector is like being out of education. Nobody wants to do handwork any longer. Everybody wants to read and wear the suits and the tie. In fact, the worst hit are the women. Most of them cannot get jobs. Most of the youths have read well. The girls, they've made first class. They have done well in school, but they are finding it difficult getting jobs. What they will do next is best left to the imagination. And that is the reason why we are in this dire situation. I believe going forward, like one of my colleagues said earlier, we must declare an emergency on unemployment. Each time there is a vacancy of 100 people, you get 1 million plus to apply for such jobs. It gets frustrating for them after some time. To even compound it, there is a limit to age when it comes to employment. They tell you they can't take anybody above 25. And most of them had been looking for a job for the last 6 years. And they're now 30. What is supposed to happen to them? They are all sitting there. The government needs to declare an emergency. And the emergency is as good as being declared now, because something has to be done. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator Ben Wajumogu.
Thank you, Mr. President. My name is Senator Ben Wajumogu. I represent the good people of Imo North. Mr. President, I want to align myself with most of the people that have spoken on this motion. As the chairman of the Senate Committee on Labor, Employment, and Productivity, you can imagine the pressure that I suffer every day. Most of my constituents believe that employment in this country is under my committee. So every day I have requests for employment. But Mr. President, there's something that I need to highlight, and that is the issue of skills acquisition. I think we have been paying lip service to skill acquisition in this country. For example, the National Employment NDE has 120 skill acquisition centers in this country. In the last budget of this budget of 2020, less than 123 million naira was budgeted for them to run the 120 skills acquisition centers spread all over this country. We have so many skill acquisition centers that have been built that have not been equipped, that are not properly run. And I believe that the major problem we have in unemployment is skill gap. Our people are unable to run their own businesses or become entrepreneurs because they have no skills. So it is very, very important that the issue of skill acquisition is highlighted and given the necessary importance that it deserves, both in our budgeting and that our state governments and local governments be encouraged. That our
Chief Whip.
Our states and local governments are encouraged to ensure that the skills acquisition centers that we already have are made to function so that our people can obtain skills and be able to run businesses of their own. Mr. President, if you go to any average building site today in Nigeria, you will find that majority of the people who come there to work are laborers from outside Nigeria, Ghanaians, Togolese, Benenua, especially in areas of high labor cost, like those who make POP ceilings, who are paid huge amount of money. But because our people lack the skills and the training. So I believe that if we want to do something about this, we need to encourage skills acquisition centers to function and provide the funds to make sure that they function. Thank you very much.
Senator Olubunmi Adetunbi.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Olubunmi Adetunbi, representing Ekiti North. I congratulate and support the mover of this motion and for the timeliness of it and the severity of the challenge. But I think, Mr. President, that we need to reframe our approach. We need to reframe our approach and
Chief Whip, you are doing a fantastic job.
You are ordering DSP.
Thank you.
Very soon you order Senate President. Buhari, you should tell Senate President to... Thank you, Mr. President. I was saying, Mr. President, that we need to reshape the narrative and the approach to solving the problem of unemployment in Nigeria. And I agree with Senator Patrick Esenwa on his submission that governments are not known for creating jobs. It is businesses that create jobs. So public sector approach to job creation don't work on a sustainable basis because it only creates fiscal expansion, government spending to pay emergency jobs that are created by government. And for Nigeria, in an era of reduced revenue and growing public resistance to borrowing, this whole approach of increasing the wage responsibility of government is a no-go area. There are three things that causes unemployment, and employment is a direct consequence of these three things. One is the low rate of capital formation. In any economy, when capital formation is difficult, it's difficult to generate new businesses. Also, in an environment where there is a high rate of business collapse, for one reason or the other, we lose jobs. And of course, lastly, is the issue of poor skills and the wrong kind of education system that does not prepare people for employment or self-employment. Therefore, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, I think the theater of action for solving the problem of unemployment in Nigeria is actually resident in the states, because this is where businesses situate, that's where businesses are created, that's where businesses collapse, that's where consumption is taking place, that's where employment is being demanded. The type of emergency we are asking for should be directed at the states. Mr. President, it will amaze us that the platform for economic coordination between the federal government and the states in 6 years of previous administration never held one meeting in this same country. But it is only in this current government that we have a rebirth of the National Economic Council, which is beginning to debate the problem of economics in the states. Mr. President, I think the prayer of this motion should emphasize the need for us to pay attention to the issue of enabling environment or doing business in states, so that competition among states for investment and employment will begin to take place. To target the federal government as the provider of jobs in a federation, I think is an anomaly. It is an anomaly because we are talking here about revenue. To raise tax, people are saying no. To borrow, people are saying no. Where does the federal government get the money? So it is the states that I think we should encourage, and our Committee on Commerce and Trade should be directed to focus more on the disaggregation of enabling environment challenges from federal to states, if possible, to local governments. I so submit, Mr. President.
We'll go to the prayers. Prayer 1. Urge the federal, state and local governments to declare emergency on the provision of employment in the use of Nigeria. Those in favor of prayer 1 say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Prayer 2. Urge the federal government through the Ministry of National Planning to put up a mechanism and program that will provide employment for our teeming unemployed graduates in all tiers of government. Those in favor of prayer 2 say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Prayer 3. Urge the federal, state and local governments to revitalize existing industries, build new ones, and provide a conducive and enabling environment for the private sector to build more industries. Those in favor of this prayer say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. And prayer 4, urge the federal government to initiate a sustainable unemployment fund for the payment of living stipends to unemployed Nigerians and to such persons secure any kind of employment. Those in favor of prayer 4 say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Thank you very much, distinguished colleagues. Leader of the Senate.
Thank you, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues. The first business of the day is the presentation of a bill standing in the name of Senator Gyang Istifanos Dun on the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria 1999 Alteration Bill 2019. Mr. President, you may wish to invite the Clerk of the Senate to read the short title of the bill.
Clerk of the Senate.
Mr. President, distinguished senators, Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria 1999 Alteration Bill 2019 SB 74, first reading.
Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria 1999 Alteration Bill 2019 SB 74, first reading taken. Leader of the Senate.
Mr. President, most distinguished colleagues, the second business of the day is the presentation of a bill standing in the name of Senator Uba Ifeanyi on the Federal University of Technology Oko Establishment, etc. Bill 2019. Mr. President, you may wish to invite the Clerk of the Senate to read the short title of the bill.
Clerk of the Senate.
Mr. President, distinguished senators, Federal University of Technology Oko Establishment, etc. Bill 2019 SB 256, first reading.
Federal University of Technology Oko Establishment, etc. Bill 2019 SB 256, first reading taken. Leader of the Senate.
Thank you, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues. The third business of the day is the presentation of a bill standing in the name of Senator Bamidele Michael Opeyemi on the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria 1999 Alteration Bill 2019. Mr. President, you may wish to invite the Clerk of the Senate to read the short title of the bill.
Clerk of the Senate.
Mr. President, distinguished senators, Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria 1999 Alteration Bill 2019 SB 259, first reading.
Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria 1999 Alteration Bill 2019 SB 259, first reading taken. Leader of the Senate.
Thank you, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues. The fourth business of the day is the presentation of a bill standing in the name of Senator Dimka Hezekiah Ayuba on the Federal University of Technology, Kabwe, Plateau State, Establishment, etc. Bill 2019. Mr. President, you may wish to invite the Clerk of the Senate to read the short title of the bill. Clerk
of the Senate.
Mr. President, distinguished senators, Federal University of Technology, Kabwe, Plateau State, Establishment, etc. Bill 2019 SB 262, first reading.
Federal University of Technology, Kabwe, Plateau State, Establishment, etc. Bill 2019 SB 262, first reading taken. Leader of the Senate.
Thank you, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues. The fifth business of the day is the presentation of a bill standing in the name of Senator Amos Bulus Kilawant on the Federal College of Agriculture, Bambam, Gombe State, Establishment, etc. Bill 2019. Mr. President, you may wish to invite the Clerk of the Senate to read the short title of the bill.
Clerk of the Senate.
Mr. President, distinguished senators, Federal College of Agriculture, Bambam, Gombe State, Establishment, etc. Bill 2019, SB 263, first reading.
Federal College of Agriculture, Bambam, Gombe State, Establishment, etc. Bill 2019, SB 263, first reading taken. Leader of the Senate.
Thank you, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues. The sixth business of the day is the presentation of a bill standing in the name of Senator Barau I. Jibrin on the Education Minimum Standards Act Amendment Bill 2019. Mr. President, you may wish to invite the Clerk of the Senate to read the short title of the bill.
Clerk of the Senate.
Mr. President, distinguished senators, Education Minimum Standards Act Amendment Bill 2019, SB 264, first reading.
Education Minimum Standards Act Amendment Bill 2019, SB 264, first reading taken. Leader of the Senate.
Thank you, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues. The first order of the day is a motion requesting the Senate to consider the request of Mr. President, Commander-in-Chief, for the confirmation of the nomination of the following persons for appointment as chairman and member of the Federal Inland Revenue Service in accordance with Section 3, Subsection 2 of the Federal Inland Revenue Service Act 2007. The first, Mohammed Mamman Nami, Executive Chairman, North Central. 2, James Yaquin Ayuba, Member, North Central. 3, Ado Anjuma, Member, Northwest. 4, Adam Baba Mohammed, Member, Northeast. 5, A. Ikene Osakwe, Member, Southeast. 6, Adewale Ogun Yomade, Member, Southwest. 7, Ehile Adetola Aibangbe, Member, South-South. Representatives of MDAs. 8, Ladidi Bara'atu Mohammed, Member, Attorney General of the Federation. 9, Godwin Emefele, Member, Central Bank of Nigeria. 10, Fatima Z. Hayatu, Member, Ministry of Finance. 11, Magbe S. Ada, Member, Revenue Mobilization, Allocation and Fiscal Commission. 12, Umar Ajia, Member, Nigerian National Petroleum Corporation. 13, DCGTM Isa, Member, Nigerian Customs Service. 14, Registrar General, Member, Corporate Affairs Commission. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, the purpose of this motion on the order paper is for the request of Mr. President CNC to be referred to the relevant committee for further legislative action. I therefore move that the Senate do consider the request of Mr. President CNC for the confirmation of the nominations of persons listed on the order paper for appointment as chairman and members for the Federal Inland Revenue Service. I so move.
Minority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. My name is Ainaya Baribe. I represent Abia South. I so second the motion, ably moved by the leader, that the nominations by Mr. President CNC as listed in the order paper for appointment be so moved to the committee. So second.
Any comments? Well, the request of Mr. President is referred to the Committee on Finance for those in favor of the motion say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. The request of Mr. President is referred to the Senate Committee on Finance to report back on the 17th day of December, that is Tuesday next week. It's okay. Wednesday for Wednesday. So it's referred to the Committee on Finance to report back within a week. That is the 18th day of December.
Mr. President, okay, my chairman is asking me to sit down, please.
But I have given you the...
Because since we are going on Christmas break on the 19th, which is Thursday, Tuesday, report is submitted. Wednesday, it is taken. Thursday, the votes and proceedings are approved. It will have been more, although the number is large, but my chairman has spoken. Thank you, Mr. President.
You know, I allowed you to speak because you are an elder in this Senate. So we didn't want to miss any of your wisdom. So thank you very much. In any case, Senator Aleru.
Thank you, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues. I remain Muhammad Adamu Aleru, representing Kebbi Central. Mr. President, it's important to consider this request, and it is being so expeditiously. But equally important, Mr. President, is the request of Mr. President to consider the nomination of the chairman for Hajj Commission and also commissioners of Hajj Commission. That request came earlier than this one, and I don't know why it has not been presented to us for consideration. You know we have problems with the Hajj Commission. I chaired the committee that investigated the operations of the chairman of the Hajj Commission, and we submitted the report, in camera, and none of us here objected to the recommendation. Mr. President has acted on that report, and I don't see why we should not consider that request also expeditiously.
Thank you very much, even though this one is not part of what we are doing, but it's out of concern you spoke. As at yesterday, I tried to call the chairman, Senate Committee on Foreign Affairs. I couldn't locate him. This morning, I spoke with Senate leader that I should locate him because we need the report. The report should have been passed today. No, it's okay. The confirmation should have been done today. But I want to assure you that the confirmation will be done before we leave, because we don't want to create any unnecessary vacuum. Just like the Federal Revenue Service, the AMCON one, which is coming next, we'll work on them to ensure that we pass them expeditiously. Thank you very much. Leader of the Senate.
Thank you, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues. The second order of the day is a motion requesting the Senate to consider the request of Mr. President C&C for the confirmation of the nomination of Mr. Edward Lamitek Adamu for appointment as chairman of the Asset Management Corporation of Nigeria in accordance with Section 10, subsection 1 of the Asset Management Corporation of Nigeria Act. Mr. President, distinguished senators, the purpose of this motion on the order paper is for the request of Mr. President C&C to be referred to the relevant committee for further legislative action. Accordingly, I therefore move that the Senate do consider the request of Mr. President C&C for the confirmation of the nomination of Mr. Edward Lamtek Adamu for appointment as chairman of the Asset Management Corporation of Nigeria. I so move.
Minority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. I so second that the Thank you, Mr. President. Abia South. I so second.
Distinguished colleagues, those in favor of the motion say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Any comments on this? Well, let me say that the request of Mr. President is referred to the Senate Committee on Banking, Insurance, and other financial institutions for further legislative action, and to report on the 18th day of December, that will be Wednesday, 2019. That's the same day as the Committee on Finance. Leader of the Senate.
Thank you, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues. The third order of the day is the presentation and consideration of the Conference Committee report on the Finance Bill 2019. Distinguished senators will recall that the Senate and the House passed different versions of the Finance Bill 2019. The Conference Committee of both houses have met and harmonized the differences in accordance with Senate Standing Order 88. Mr. President, you may wish to invite distinguished Senator Adeola Solomon Olamilekan to move the motion for the Senate to consider the conference report.
Senator Adeola Solomon Olamilekan.
Mr. President, very distinguished colleague, Adiola Solomon Olamilekan, representing Lagos West Senatorial District and the Senate of the Federal Republic of Nigeria. Mr. President, distinguished colleague, may I move that this Senate do receive the report of the Senate Committee on Finance on the Conference Committee on the Nigerian Tax and Fiscal Law Amendment Bill, Finance Bill 2019. Mr. President, distinguished colleague, I so move.
Senator James Manager.
Thank you, Mr. President. My highly respected colleagues, I second the motion as moved by the chairman, Senior Committee on Finance, that he be allowed to lay his report. Thank you, Mr. President, for the opportunity.
Those in favor of the motion say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Please end the report. Chairman, present your report.
Mr. President, very distinguished colleague, once more, Adiola Solomon Olamilekan, representing Lagos West Senatorial District and the Senate of Federal Republic of Nigeria. Mr. President, I present to this Senate the report of the National Assembly Conference Committee on the Nigerian Tax and Fiscal Law Amendment Bill 2019, the Finance Bill. Introduction. Following the consideration and the passage of the Nigerian Tax and Fiscal Law Amendment Bill 2019 by the Senate and the House of Representatives on Thursday, 21st December and Thursday, the 5th of December 2019, respectively, the two chambers of the National Assembly set up a conference committee to harmonize area of differences in the finance bill. 2.0, we have the membership of the committee for both the House and the Senate. 2.3, we have the conference action. Mr. President, the conference committee met on Tuesday, the 10th December 2019, and harmonized the differences in the finance bill 2019 as part by the two chambers. The Finance Bill 2019 contained a total of 56 sections, out of which the Senate and the House of Representatives concur on 39 sections and harmonized 17 sections. The following numbers of sections concurred and harmonized by the Senate and the House of Representatives on the 7th Act bill as passed. Acts to be amended under the Finance Bill are as follows. Mr. President, I won't want to bother us. Under section 3.0 subsection 1, we have the Company and Allied Matter Act, which is the CETA. We have the total number of bills, clauses considered is 26, 70 were concurred, 9 were harmonized. Under the personal income tax, the total number of 8 clauses was set out for amendment, 6 were concurred, and only 2 were harmonized. Under the petroleum profit tax, the section provided for amended was concurred. The value-added tax, a total number of 14 sections were brought by the executive for amendment. The conference harmonized just 4, while 10 of that sections were concurred. Under the Custom and Excise Matter Act, the only section for amendment was harmonized at the conference. The capital gain tax, a total number of 3 sections for amendment were eventually concurred at the committee level. The Stamp Duty Act, in the Stamp Duty Act, only the interpretation section was harmonized, while the 3 other sections for amendment were concurred at the committee level. Recommendations. Mr. President, let me bring to our notice that most of this harmonization that was done was as a result of new introduction at the House of Representatives public hearing by the executive. So we brought it to the committee and we looked into it extensively before we agreed to harmonize both the Senate and the House. Recommendation. The conference committee, after the clause-by-clause consideration of the Finance Bill 2019, the following were adopted. 1. The Company Income Tax Act. A. Section 9, subsection 1H, Section 10, 1 and 2, Section 23, Section 27, 1K, Section 39, 1C, Section 43C, Section 82, Section 105, subsection 1 of the House of Representatives version was adopted. B. Section 23 of CETA of the House of Representatives version was adopted with following little amendment which was done. C. Section 43C of the Senate version was adopted. Under the Personal Income Tax Act, Section 31 and Section 108 subsection 82 of the House of Representatives version was adopted. 3. Under the value-added tax, the House of Representatives deleted the provision of Section 10C and moved it to create a new Section 14.3. Section 19 subsection 1 and 2 of the House of Representatives version was adopted, while Section 46 of the House of Representatives version was equally adopted under the value-added tax. Under the Custom and Excise Tariff, which basically is to protect the local manufacturers, Part 1 and Section 21 of the House version was adopted, while under the Stamp Duty Act, Section 4 of the House version was adopted, and Section 1, subsection 1 and 2 of the House version was equally adopted under the Stamp Duty Act. Conclusion. The committee expressed appreciation to the leadership of the Senate and also thanked the entire members of the committee and staff of the Secretariat who work assiduously to ensure timely completion of this report. Thank you and God bless you. Thank you, Mr. President.
Any comments? Well, distinguished colleagues, because this is a conference committee report, this report is the same thing that is being presented in the House. We can't change, add or subtract anything. So I will put the question for the adoption of the conference report in its entirety. Those in favor that the Senate do approve the conference committee report on the Finance Bill 2019 say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Thank you very much, distinguished colleagues. Leader of the Senate.
Thank you, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues. The fourth order of the day is the second reading of the 1999 Constitutional Alteration Bill 2019. Distinguished senators will recall that Senator Suswan Gabriel introduced the National Assembly Inauguration Bill 2019 and was debated on Wednesday, 13th November 2019. Having debated the provisions of the bill, it was stood down to be presented as part of the constitutional amendment. The purpose of this second reading, therefore, is to refer the bill to the relevant committee. I therefore move that this bill be referred to the relevant committee.
Minority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. I so second that the bill be moved to the relevant committee.
Those in favor of the motion say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. The bill is referred to the Committee on Constitutional Review when constituted. Leader of the Senate.
Thank you, Mr. President. The fifth order of the day is the second reading of the Federal University of Agriculture and Technology, Okeogun, Oyo State, Establishment, etc. Bill 2019. Distinguished senators will recall that the bill was read the first time in this chamber on Wednesday, 13th November 2019. Mr. President, you may wish to invite distinguished Senator Buhari Abdul Fattah to move the motion for the bill to be read a second time.
Senator Buhari Abdul Fattah.
Mr. President, distinguished colleague, a bill for an act to establish Federal University of Agriculture and Technology, Okeogun, Oyo State. Mr. President, my distinguished colleague, it is a great pleasure for me to lead a debate on this timeless bill for an act to establish Federal University of Agriculture and Technology, Okeogun. This bill was read on the floor of this House chamber on the 13th of November 2019. Mr. President, Okeogun is a zone of Oyo State that comprises of 10 local governments with more than 60% of entire Oyo State landmass, and arguably an agrarian area that is the food basket of the state, which can be transformed to the food basket of the nation. The size and population of the youth in the area is encouraged enough to feed the nation because this zone boasts up to 3 million population of reasonable agile youth who have passion for agriculture and who have already engaged in it. But this engagement is more or less for subsistence purpose. Okeogun area is a very fertile land for agriculture, and this always serves as temptation for the willing youth who always till the land for agricultural purposes. It is, however, pathetic, Mr. President, my distinguished colleague, that despite this intimidating population of the agile youth in this area, the tempting, sizable, arable, fertile land of the place, the zone can neither boast of a single federal government princess nor a higher institution of learning. In fact, not even a federal government college. Meanwhile, Mr. President, my distinguished colleague, the global impact of agriculture and technology on the world today is immeasurable. The world now takes advantage of agriculture and technology in different ways and use it to improve lives in the society. In today's world, just about everything is now more convenient and accessible due to advance in technology across all sectors. Agriculture process that once required dozens upon dozens of human workers are now being automated and thereby cost efficient for farmers. Technology has shown people more efficient way to do things, even in agriculture, and this process get more good results. For example, education has been greatly advanced by technology advances of computer. Students are able to learn on the global scale without even leaving their classroom, and that is how technology has impacted on agriculture in the developed world. Thereby setting up a University of Agriculture will attract more youth to the farming and reduce unemployment in our society. Just like what Adam Smith said, an economist nearest to source of raw materials. Also, Mr. President, my distinguished colleague, the gospel and effort of this present administration is unarguable towards immediate and reasonable diversification of our nation's economy. Not only this, the gospel tilts more towards better focus on our agricultural activities. Also, Mr. President, economic experts have advised that one of the solutions to our current economic doldrums is to encourage export business in the country and discourage importation of what we can produce locally, like the President said in the beginning of this administration. That is, the government will focus on agriculture. And the former Minister of Agriculture corroborated this some months ago, that the government will establish additional universities in agriculture to address the shortage of existing universities of agriculture in the country. Mr. President, it is needless to stress further that agriculture is very important in our national economy redirection. As a scholar note, taxes do not produce nationwide and development. Wealth has to be produced from nature, from tilling and land of mining metal, or felling trees, or turning raw material into finished product for consumption. We need to note that part of this reason, Okeogun people and people of other parts of this country are currently not engaging in commercial farming is lack of education and innovation. Talents remain underutilized if not supported with education and innovation. So there's a need to strengthen the education and innovation of the people of this area and Nigeria at large in the aspect of agriculture in order to expand their commercial opportunity in farming and boost our national economy. Mr. President, my distinguished colleague, in view of the important role that technology and education play in agricultural activity in modern world, and considering the important place that agriculture now occupy in our struggle to turn our national economy around, I urge and appeal to my colleague to support this bill in order to give educational and technology support in our local farmer as to catch onto the opportunity of the fertile land which we have in Okeogun, which the nature has obliged our country. Mr. President, my distinguished colleague, in compliance with Order 773 of the Standing Rules of the Senate of the Federal Republic of Nigeria with respect to the procedure of the bill, compiled and consolidated on this bill hereby attached. Thank you, Mr. President.
Deputy Senate Chief Whip.
Thank you, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues. Aliu Sabi Abdullahi, I want to second and support this motion or this bill and to request my colleague that we support it to be read the second time. In doing so, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, let me say that the Okeogun area is actually neighboring Borgu, both in Kwara and in Niger. And it is very, very trite and a well-known fact that that area itself is completely marginalized, abandoned, forgotten, and yet very blessed with abundant human and natural resources. And as it is being said in this particular proposed bill, the presence of a higher institution in that area will rub off on almost 3 states or 4, because even Ogun State, the northern part, is actually neighboring that particular area. And I know as a matter of fact that the blessing they have in terms of agriculture cannot be something we can throw away. And if, as we have debated in this hollow chamber, that we need to diversify our economy, then there is no gainsaying that we should support every nook and cranny of this country to have the required education. Earlier on today, we've just discussed the issue of unemployment. And you can imagine a particular area that size, where for people who are in that area to travel to any major town, you travel for nothing less than 4 hours. That tells you that there is a lot of gap. There is a lot of white space for development to take place. And I believe the presence of this university in that place will definitely do every good that a university should do. Given the fact that they have this land and human potential, then we can imagine what this country stands to benefit. With this, I want to urge my colleagues to support that this bill be read the second time.
Senator Mohamed Adamu Alero.
Thank you, Mr. President. I remain Mohamed Adamu Alero, representing Kebbi Central. Mr. President, I rise to give support to this very important bill sponsored by the Acting Chief Whip, Senator Abdul Fattah Buhari. The establishment of this university will certainly give access to education to numerous people that are looking for university education. And Mr. President, university education alone does not guarantee employment. But if it is functional education, and which I believe the University of Agriculture is going to be functional, by so doing, it will train so many youth in poultry, in fishery, and all branches of agriculture. So, apart from the abundant arable land in this area, we all know that this area is well blessed with rainfall. I think about 7 to 8 months of rainfall, which is not possible in the northern part of the country. And indeed, it will be a very, very viable institution. It will be a training ground for various agriculturalists. And for this reason, I support this motion, and I urge all my colleagues to do the same. And it will lead to the diversification of our economy. just like what the deputy leader said, we discussed this morning about unemployment. We discussed various causes of unemployment, and one of the reasons is lack of functional education. Most of the graduates that graduate from our universities are looking for white-collar jobs, and these white-collar jobs are not available anymore. It is a known fact that out of 10 university students that graduated from our school, hardly can 2 get employment. Mr. President, this is very, very alarming. So we need to emphasize on functional education. And for this reason, I support the establishment of this university, and I urge all my colleagues to do the same. Thank you very much.
Senator Ibukule Amusu.
Thank you, Mr. President. Ibukule Amusu, I represent Ogun Central. Let me commend Senator Fatai Buhari for this initiative. Mr. President, let me say for the often time that anything that has to do with educating our youth, our people, it's any day will have my support. And it is not just any university, it is University of Agriculture and Technology. Mr. President, just this morning, because I just listened to what distinguished Senator Alero said, we talked extensively about unemployment in Nigeria, which is now what I call a permanent future in one of the ills that is bedeviling our nation. Mr. President, unless we diversify our economy, we will continue to just run in circles. And one of the potent ways of doing this is through agriculture and technology. And when we get our younger ones, our youth, to be otherwise engaged, they will not have time to do frivolous things that will continue to damage the existence of our nation, indeed our social economic development. So, Mr. President, a very good way of achieving all of these things that we are talking about is to, when all of us in our various locations, in our various states, when we come up with initiatives like this. Yes, I know people will argue that there are too many, but truly there are not even too many. The problem is that we do not have enough wherewithal to back all of them. But we cannot say because we are shying away from how we will fund them and we will not do anything. What we should do is what we are already doing, looking for ways and means of increasing the IGR of this country. When we do that, we'll have enough resources to execute initiatives like this. So, Mr. President, you know, all of us know what agriculture can do, what technology can do. The world is now a global village, it's technology-driven, and agriculture is playing a huge role in creating employment for our younger ones. Indeed, not just them alone, even for all of us. You know in those days what agriculture did for our economy. So the best way to do is to go back to basics and make sure that we make agriculture the bedrock of our economy. This will employ several of our youth. By doing this, we are going to create wealth for our people. And without creation of wealth, we will not develop as a nation. We are going to now encourage our young ones to use their hands, not just after maybe graduating, they are waiting for white-collar jobs. That is even non-existent. It has been argued this morning that government, all that government needs to do is to create an enabling environment for business to thrive. And this is one of those enabling environments so that people, of course, they will have the necessary skill, the necessary exposure and experience to go into agriculture. So on this note, Mr. President, I want to support the establishment of this University of Agriculture and Technology in Okeogun, Oyo State, and urge my colleagues to support this initiative because this is the way to go if we want to develop our economy and by extension our nation. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator James Obowo, Manager.
Thank you, Mr. President. My highly respected colleagues, James Obowo, Manager, Delta South. Mr. President, while not directly against this bill, because education is very important, and of course, we were talking about the establishment of a University of Agriculture and Technology in Okeogun area of Oyo State. Only educated people can get to this place. So education is the foundation for greatness in modern times. And therefore, everything about education is important. And the number of universities that we have cannot be enough because the population is growing by the day. Abdul Fatai Buhari is a politician. And this place is populated by only politicians. We are representing the people. And therefore, bills like this are not unexpected. Mr. President, my highly respected colleagues, I am aware that the premier university of this country is in the same Oyo State, University of Ibadan, where Abdul Fatai comes from. And of course, Lautech is in Ogbomoso, owned by two states, Osun State and that of Oyo State. And the Lautech is in Ogbomoso, the same Okeogun area. Well, in Oyo State, all the same.
You are protected.
Thank you, Mr. President. And there are a lot of other federal establishments in that Oyo State. Mr. President, this University of Agriculture and Technology, I'm aware because I served my youth corps there in Ibadan. I'm very familiar with that environment, but I served there a number of years ago. So I may not know the place the same way you know the place, so forgive me. Mr. President, I'm aware very well that there is a functioning faculty of agriculture in the University of Ibadan. And there is also another one in Lautech, another university, state-owned. And there are also private universities in Oyo State. And all these universities have agriculture and technology as faculties. Mr. President, whereas I'm not against this particular bill, but I want to emphasize, Abdul Fatai Buhari is my man. Mr. President, we must also be conscious of the productivity, the people that we produce as graduates, the people that will also be there to teach them. We have manpower problems here and there. The emphasis today must be how do we produce highly productive graduates that will be relevant to whatever we have in this country. That is supposed to be the emphasis. For us to have universities in all communities in the country, I don't think it will serve the purpose that we are aspiring to have in the country today. But because this is coming from Abdul Fatai, I don't want to call it a political bill, but we...
Now you don't have my protection. Well, thank you very much, distinguished colleagues. I will put the question. Those in favor that this bill be now read a second time, say aye. Those against, say nay. The ayes have it. Clerk of the Senate.
Mr. President, distinguished senators, a bill for an act to provide for the establishment of the Federal University of Agriculture and Technology, Okeogun, and for other related matters thereof, 2019, second reading.
A bill for an act to provide for the establishment of the Federal University of Agriculture and Technology, Okeogun, and for other related matters thereof, 2019, second reading taken. And the bill is referred to the Senate Committee on Tertiary Institutions and Third Fund to report back within 4 weeks. Leader of the Senate.
Thank you, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues. The sixth order of the day is the second reading of the Federal Road Authority Establishment, etc. Bill 2019. Distinguished senators will recall that the bill was read the first time in this chamber on Thursday, 10th October 2019. Mr. President, you may wish to invite Senator Basi Gershon to move the motion for the bill to be read a second time.
Senator Gershon Basi.
Thank you, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues. This is my pleasure to lead this debate on a bill for an act to repeal the Federal Road Maintenance Agency Act as amended and to establish the Federal Roads Authority Bill. Mr. President, my distinguished colleagues, permit me to lead the debate on this very important bill, which seeks to repeal the Federal Road Maintenance Agency Act of 2002 as amended and to establish the Federal Roads Authority. This bill was read for the first time in these chambers on Thursday, the 10th of October, 2019. Distinguished colleagues, you will all agree with me that the 36,000-kilometer federal road network is by far the largest and most valuable single public infrastructure asset owned by the federal government of Nigeria. And there is nowhere in the world that this expanse of road network is managed solely by government. But unfortunately, over 80% of goods and services are transported by road, leading to tremendous pressure on our roads since other modes of transportation like rail and shipping, inland waterways, are underdeveloped and air transportation is too expensive for most Nigerians. Road development and maintenance in Nigeria seems uncoordinated and vulnerable to extreme climate events. Funding is poor and comes in an unpredictable manner, making the cost of road maintenance in Nigeria one of the highest in the world. Despite the amendment of the FIRMA Act in 2007, mandating the PPPRA to provide funding for road maintenance, nothing has been released by PPRA for the purpose of road maintenance to date. As a result, over 870 billion naira is owed by PPPRA for road maintenance as we speak. Mr. President, my distinguished colleagues, the Federal Road Authority Bill seeks to create a framework that allows other revenue streams to support government's budgetary efforts on roads. It further seeks to, one, manage the road network so that it is safe and efficient with a view to meeting the socio-economic demands of the country. Two, promote the sustainable development and operation of the road sector. And three, facilitate the development of competitive markets and promotion of enabling environment for private sector participation in the financing, maintenance, and improvement of our roads in Nigeria. The Federal Road Authority will, in collaboration with the Federal Road Safety Corps, advise the federal government on effective methods of curbing road accidents, enforcement of road traffic legislation, prevention of damage to roads, and promotion of road safety. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, Nigeria needs a road sector that is oversighted by the Ministry of Works, managed by the Federal Road Authority, delivered by private sector, and financed by both government subventions and revenues that are
financed by both government subventions and revenues that are outside the national government budgetary system. The structure envisaged in the Federal Roads Authority Bill is a model that is yielding fruit in other climes. For instance, in India, the National Highway Authority of India is an agency with its own board and road fund. It raises bonds, borrows from the IFC, and has fuel levy concessions and concessions out roads to private sector through PPPs. In South Africa, South Africa National Road Agency operates as an executive agency, concessions out roads, and imposes vehicle tax. In the United States of America, the Federal Highway Administration is an agency within the U.S. Department of Transportation that supports states and local governments in the design, construction, and maintenance of the national highway system through levies and taxes. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, it is time for Nigeria to have a road authority that is in sync with international best practices on best practices on road management and maintenance. A road authority that will measure up to countries like Australia, Denmark, Switzerland, and the Netherlands, amongst others, which are countries with high road safety performance ratings. A road authority that will help Nigeria through conscious institutional capacity building and partnership with the international development community, increase road safety. Distinguished colleagues, the Ninth Senate needs to clearly work towards revamping the Nigerian road network, which has suffered neglect over the years because of poor funding. We have to immediately ensure that the 5% user pump price of petrol and diesel accruing to road maintenance agencies from PPPRA is remitted for that purpose, and also pass the Federal Road Authority Bill into law to enable us achieve a sustainable road maintenance framework that will ensure that our federal and state roads compete favorably with roads in developed countries. Mr. President, and my highly respected colleagues, this is what this bill, the Federal Roads Authority Bill, seeks to achieve. I therefore enjoin all of you to support this bill in its entirety. I so submit.
Distinguished Senator Clifford Odia.
Mr. President, my very distinguished colleagues, I am Senator Clifford Odia, representing Edo Central Senatorial District. Mr. President, and my distinguished colleagues, I rise to wholeheartedly thank the mover or the sponsor of this bill for this all-important bill, Mr. President, because the time has come at this point in time in the course of our national development to take some hard decisions in order for us to be able to make some progress. We will recall, Mr. President, the colleagues, that this bill was passed by the 8th Senate, by the 8th National Assembly, because of the urgent need to reposition the road sector development in this country. Unfortunately, we had some problems around the line, so no approval, Mr. President. I think this time around, I'm sure a lot of work has been done again on it with the approval of most of the stakeholders for us to make progress in this direction. But let me say here, Mr. President, that there's no way that the road sector development in this country will be able to make some serious progress if there is no authority that is, mandated, the high constitutional mandate to manage that sector. Because right now, you see, FEMA is doing some work, Federal Ministry of Work is also doing some work. You have the Sovereign Wealth Fund also trying to do some work. I think the time has come for us to have a proper coordination of the road sector development. Because if we don't do it that way, it will be very, very difficult for us to make some progress. For instance, now, Mr. President, if you look at the major alignments in this country, they are not passable. The roads are completely bad, and it has become a major issue in this country. For over 2, 4, 5 years now, Nigerians have not been able to really carry out serious business in this country because of the poor network of roads. And I think the timely approval of this road authority bill will go a long way to solving these problems. I so support this bill, Mr. President. Thank you.
Senator Stella.
Thank you, Mr. President, dear colleagues. My name is Stella Adeze Odua, and I represent Anambra North. Mr. President, dear colleagues, clearly we all know that it's impossible to repair or maintain our roads through budgetary process. The resources are just not available. And so the only way we can have roads that are passable, roads that are strong enough, and roads that can be maintained is to have a coordinated and a coordination agency. And so I want to support this bill. But most importantly, Mr. President, what this bill proposes is what is global best practice. That we take away repairs of our roads, constructions of our roads out of our budgets and get business, private enterprises to come into road construction. In doing so, anybody who constructs a road knows that there are things beyond just tolling the gates, having a toll gate at the road. And so the value chain, where more resources comes to the entrepreneur, is there, i.e. they will have a truck park, they will have vehicle park, they will have stop parks, they will have stations. But most importantly, other services like security, i.e. there are alternative ways and one way is more secured than the other. Clearly passengers will fly that road more than the other one. So I think it is good and it's far better for us to take the road away from federal budget and take it to private enterprises. As long as the traffic count is justifiable for the investment, I think many businesses will want to get involved in our road construction. And I think the security issues we have on our highways will be minimized to a large extent, because that's the only way travelers will use the road. And so, Mr. President, dear colleagues, I want to support this wonderful bill. Thank you very much. I so support.
Senator Surajuddin Ajibola.
Thank you, Mr. President. Distinguished colleague, I'm Dr. Surajuddin Ajibola Bashiru. I represent Osun Central Senatorial District. I think this bill and its purpose is one in sync with the legislative agenda of the 9th Assembly, and that is promotion of economic prosperity. There's no gainsaying that you cannot have the kind of economic development that we envisage without good roads. And it is also indubitable that when we travel all over the country, virtually all our roads are in a state of disrepair, not because the government is not concerned at all levels, but because there's paucity of resources to be able to address the infrastructure deficiency. During the debate on the 2020 budget, I said that looking at even what has been allocated for the power analysis sector, a sum of 256 billion, it is far less to even tackle outstanding obligations of contractors for work has been done. And to validate that, yesterday, the Honorable Minister for Finance stated that as of today, outstanding of about 360 billion is owed to existing contractors. Therefore, the attraction of this bill is the focus on alternative source of financing public infrastructure, particularly road infrastructure. We cannot continue to develop on existing budgetary and certification method for us to be able to allow our roads to be developed. So the way to go about it is to have a framework that alternatively, constructively, and creatively finance the road infrastructure, particularly in the area of raising bonds, specifically for roads, and the area of looking at contractor financing, by which roads can be completed within stipulated period, and the payment, together with the financing element, spread over a long period of time with guarantee from the authority. And I will also say that the bill is commendable because it's thinking out of the box. One of the bane of our development is that when an institution has been set up, we don't bother to think back and assess the continuous relevance and utility of such organization. Perhaps when FEMA was set up, it was useful. But when we drive around our society today, the question that keeps coming to my mind is that, is there still the relevance of FEMA for both possible road maintenance? But actually, every road in every part of Nigeria is not properly being maintained. So I think thinking out of the box, and of course taking from the experience of bread prices in other countries, will help us in addressing infrastructure deficiency in the area of road. I therefore commend the sponsor of the bill and also urge our colleague to allow the bill to process for further legislative action. Thank you, Mr. President.
Very much, Senator Bala Ibn Allah.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, and my distinguished colleagues. I think distinguished Senator Stella Odua and Turajuddin have captured what exactly I wanted to say. We cannot, and it has never been done anywhere, where the roads in a country are established and maintained through budgetary allocation. It's not done. Because the consequence of that is that when the roads get bad, then there is no provision in the budget for repairs, then it means we have to wait for another year to be able to repair the road. That is, even if it is possible that it can be captured within the so-called envelope in the budgeting system that we operate. Now, the sponsor of this bill cited what obtains elsewhere. Those of us who are privileged to travel to some of these countries, we have seen, Mr. President, that road is entirely left to revolving funds accruing from different parts of the economy, different sections of the economy. I'll give you an example, sir. If you drive in any of the roads in the US, I'm not so sure that you can travel over 2,000 miles and find one pothole. The issue is, and I said, let me find out what exactly is happening. Now, what normally happens is that the way the roads are funded is in such a way that the funds become available for use immediately when there is a problem. It is only in that country that I hear, and some other countries, that even roads expire. So even when they don't have pothole and they expire, they are removed and they resurfaced because those funds are there. Now let me give you an example, sir. In Nigeria, I can't understand. If today we take decision that for every vehicle that has to be on Nigerian road, it must be properly licensed and with insurance, we are going to raise a lot of money.
Yes.
Similarly, no wahala.
I agree, 100%.
Because anyone who can afford to drive a vehicle will ordinarily afford between 15 to 20,000 to renew his particulars.
Yes.
But today in Nigeria, everybody wants to be on good road, and he doesn't want to pay for license.
Yes.
But you see, he can be on that road that is bad, spoil his shock absorber,
kill some people, to him, that is okay. So it's an issue of rethinking. Penny wise, pound foolish. Why not pay this money? Then put it in this kind of agency that my brother is proposing. And then task them with the responsibility of making sure that these roads are properly maintained. What it means is that you will drive for about 15 years, you still can have your car with no wahala. But today, even if you buy a new car, in fact, we say the lifespan of even official car is 4 years. That is funny. So I cannot, when people think, I get amazed. Because when we take the right decision in this country, I'm telling you, we will do a lot seamlessly without any wahala. Let me give you an additional example, Mr. President. In the US, if a contract is given for the construction of a road, and then they are given 6 or 7 months to complete, a provision is made that if you can complete it within 4 months, in addition to the contract sum, you get some money. This is to help you to do that within the stipulated period. But the reverse is the case here. You give a contract for road for 1 year, and the man will not do it, and then he comes back to say he needs variation because money has changed. And these are some of the things that we must sit down and take this opportunity and nip all these things and be sure that they work. We cannot continue to go this way. We can't continue to go this way. So I think that when this bill gets to the committee, something radical has to be done, and then let the committee be open enough to allow ideas to come. I have read taxation law. I know that one of the best input that you can get from taxation is population. And we have the population. And when you have the population, the best taxing policy is to be broad-based. If you have 180 million Nigerians, Mr. President, and if everybody is giving 1,000, you can see the amount of money you are raising. But rather, we will want some experts to come and tell us that you can raise this amount of money by raising the percentage of this, which will not take us to anywhere. So certain decisions, you can't even understand where they are coming from. So I think that at committee level, we need to really look at these issues. There is nothing wrong with opening your doors to ideas. Ideas must always come. Use them. And then, I'm telling you, we can get out of this. So I thank my colleague for bringing this bill, and I urge my colleagues to support it because we all want to be seen to be driving safely on our roads and then saving the lives of our people. It pains me when it takes you almost 7, 8, 9 years to produce a medical doctor or a lawyer or somebody professionally trained, and then you put him in the road and then you kill him, and then it doesn't make any meaning to you. To you, you are happy. It doesn't work anywhere. Our responsibility is to save life and property. And I think that we must do whatever is humanly possible along that line. So in that vein, I support this bill, and I urge the committee to do a thorough job when it comes back to us for consideration. Thank you, sir.
Senator Sadiq Suleiman Umar.
Thank you, Mr. President. My distinguished colleagues, I am Sadiq Suleiman Umar. I represent the good and decent people of Kwara North. Mr. President, it will interest you to know that anytime I meet distinguished Senator Garcia on the road, in the chamber, anywhere, all I tell you, I don't talk to her, I just distinguish all the roads in my senatorial district are bad. That's all I tell her. That is because it's a serious matter for me. And it is a serious matter because bad roads has myriad of ramification of problems. Our farmers don't get value for their efforts. They can't transport their produce to get value for their efforts. Why? Because our roads are bad. Insecurity. Armed robbers stop in strategic locations to torture citizens. They take advantage of bad roads. Our people get killed, they get deformed almost every day. Why? Because of bad roads. I can mention so many reasons why bad roads remain at the center of our development in this country. And interestingly, for decades, what we budget for roads, less than 5% of what we need is what we budget for roads. And why? Because the money is not even there. So, we can't continue to do the same thing and expect any miracle. Our roads cannot get better until we think creatively and out of the box. And thank God, Gershom, perhaps because of my perpetual torture, has brought this bill today. I therefore urge everyone here, all of us, to support this bill so that we have multiple funding streams, particularly the private sectors to come in, as is the best global practice, to ensure that there's enough funding to be able to fix our roads so that we can move Nigeria to the next level. I so support this bill, Mr. President. Thank you.
Senator Danjuma.
Thank you, Mr. President. My distinguished colleagues, I'm Senator La Danjuma, representing Kaduna South. Not always. I stand here to support this bill. It is very, very important. Our roads in this country are in a very, very bad shape. And of course, the person that brought this motion is a very, very good motion. And I stand here to support it. And I'm with the opinion that this toll gate in all the highways should be introduced so that we can be able to get money to maintain this road. More so, armed robbers, as by other persons have said, that armed robbers are using the advantage of bad roads to be killing people all along. They can stop anytime and search you, collect your cars because of bad road. I'm with the opinion, if this bill can be taken into consideration, that all bad roads should be used, all the money collected at the toll gate to maintain all the roads. FEMA should be ups and doing. All contract given to contractors should be checkmating them at any given time when a contract is awarded out. Most of our contractors are given contract to do roads. They don't maintain and put the basic things that they are supposed to do there. They will just be doing things outrightly just to get their money and walk away. And nobody is checkmating them. So I'm with the opinion that all contract given out to any contractor, FEMA should be ups and doing, making sure that they get the right thing out of them. I so support that this bill should be given second consideration. Thank you.
Senator Yusuf.
Thank you, Mr. President. My name is Yusuf Abubakar Yusuf. I represent Taraba Central. First and foremost, I support this bill, and I also call my colleagues to support this bill for the following reasons. Funding is the #1 culprit in this case. How do we fund our roads, the road infrastructure in this country? So just as what my colleague said, we have so many vehicles in this country, and there's no reason why the users of the roads should not pay for the usage of the roads. For users to pay, we must categorize the users. There are some luxury vehicle users, there are some goods road users, there are other passengers, and the rest of it. To do such a funding, as I call funding engineering, for this kind of infrastructure, first and foremost, an addition to maybe 1,000 naira, 2,000 naira on car registrations, motor vehicle registrations, renewals, and the rest per month. If we have, for instance, maybe 5 million luxury vehicles in this country, 5 million times 1,000 is 5 billion per month. 5 billion times more times 12 is, we have 60 billion. And I'm sure 60 billion from just side alone will do a lot of justice to it. Secondly, sir, everywhere in the world, financing road infrastructure has to come from the commercial side. We can issue what we call project-type bond for maybe 25 years, 30 years duration. And by the time we categorize the roads and we define where appropriate toll gates will be established, those toll gates will pay for these borrowings. Now, coming to PPRA, first of all, you've got to look at what is PPPRA. Are they really relevant in the present circumstances? Let us be very, very honest with ourselves. What is Petroleum Product Pricing Regulatory Authority? What are they regulating? They are not regulating any price. What is petroleum equalization doing? So for me, to rely on something that is coming from PPPRA to fund FEMA, I think it's a contraption that cannot work. So first of all, let us determine whether the efficiency of the agency is also what is required in this economy. For me, PPPRA came as a result of the government then trying to establish the goodwill of Petroleum Equalization Fund. What people say is, could you abolish Petroleum Equalization Fund? The government say, no, it's too risky for that, for that, for that. Now, how do we compensate the sector that is financing petroleum equalization? The government then came with the idea of Petroleum Product Pricing Regulatory Agency, and that's what we have. So for me, it is a system which has institutions that are not efficient, that are adding more cost, to the administration of this country and creating more problems for even financing our road infrastructure. Finally, sir, FEMA, as it is today, yes, there are contracts awarded. Sometimes they do direct labor and what have you. Everywhere, federal government has awarded contracts. I said it here, sir. There's a difference between performance bond and advance payment guarantee. The roads between Jalingo and Zim, that contract was revoked after an advance payment has been given of nearly 300 million. There was no performance bond. The advance payment guarantee was a useless paper, and the contractor has not done anything. Nothing Ministry of Works can do. So Nigeria has lost money because there was no performance bond. So the earlier the better, we imbibe the culture or the standardization of how we finance our contracts, how we protect our advance payments, how we protect our contracts will be fundamentally better. So with this, I support this bill wholeheartedly. We need it, and we need it even like yesterday. And I support it, so I do, Mr. President.
Senator Barrow Jibril.
Thank you, Mr. President. I am Senator Barrow Jibril, representing Canada. Mr. President, let me first of all commend Senator Gershom Basi for sponsoring this bill, and also show my support, lend my voice and my support to this very, very important bill. Mr. President, we cannot continue to remain in isolation on the way we do affairs in this country in relation to establish practices within the Committee of Nations. It is a fact that governments world over, particularly developed countries and even emerging economies, They don't bother themselves in constructing roads or maintaining roads and so on and so forth. The model that has been applied now, which is working in most of these countries, is that of concessioning roads to private sector, to the private sectors of those countries. Private enterprise, business enterprises, they are the one constructing roads and maintaining these roads. Government does not have funds, nowhere. And we can't remain in isolation. We can't. Government does not have the wherewithal, the resources to construct roads and maintain them. It's an old model. It has been discarded since. Then why should we continue to operate on this failed model? It's a failed model. We need to come back or to go back to where? To the model that is being used all over, that is working. Businesses are given roads. You take Abuja, Kaduna Road, construct the road and maintain the road. And even the security of that road. Some companies are there, they are ready to construct this road, rehabilitate this road, and then maintain them, even provide security so that you no longer have to call the police or army to, deal with these kidnappers, along that road. So, sir, we need to come back to this model. We need to work based on this model. Why should we? Because some interests don't want to be. Some people are making money from construction and from maintaining these roads. Let's work with the executive, sir. Let's make sure that 80% of the roads in Morocco are built by the private sector. In Singapore, in the US, everywhere. Now we construct the road and we allow the road to be, within a short period of time, the roads will go bad, and then we start pumping in money to maintain the roads. Because if you give a business to construct the road, you will not allow a situation where you find a truck, a road that's supposed to take a maximum amount of certain weight, and that will be doubled. Before you know it, that road will go bad. So I support this bill principally because of this, the issue of concession that have been mentioned. And I thank you for that. So, sir, let's expedite action. Discard this old model and then work on the new model. Mr. President, I know you'll be able to do it. You talk with the executive, let them be serious, and then we'll sit down and sort out this matter. I so submit, Mr. President.
Senator Kabir Barkia. Senator Adamu Alero.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues. I remain Muhammad Adamu Alero, representing Kebbi Central. Mr. President, let me, for emphasis, repeat what my colleagues have mentioned, that there is no way the government or the Federation will be able to fund road rehabilitation or road reconstruction in this country. Mr. President, you could recall during our debate on the 2020 budget, I made it abundantly clear that the amount of money required in the road sector is huge, to the extent that we wrote to you, jointly with the House of Representatives, that what is provided in the budget is just 157 billion naira. And what is required by the Federal Ministry of Works is well over 800 billion naira. And there is no way they can fund over 500 roads that are currently under construction or reconstruction or rehabilitation. So there is no gainsaying the fact that government cannot fund the reconstruction of roads. And the only way to go, Mr. President, is to go public-private partnership. We just have to involve the private sector to participate in the road sector of this country. There is money. All what's required in the Enabling Act. We have to amend our laws so that those who bring in this money, whether they are in Nigeria or abroad, can recoup their investment and continue. As said by the presenter or the sponsor in the lead debate, countries like South Africa, Malaysia, Morocco, they have a functional system where government has completely removed its hands from road reconstruction. They are leaving it to the private sector, and every vehicle that ply that road pay what's stipulated in the act. If it is a truck, there is a certain amount. If it's a four-wheel drive vehicle, it will pay a certain amount. If it is a petroleum tanker, it will pay a certain amount. But here in Nigeria, Mr. President, it is really difficult because most of the vehicles that are registered are not fixed to a particular address. They have no fixed address. Some of the vehicles that apply our roads, Mr. President, they don't even know who registered them. So, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, this is a very important bill, and I want all my colleagues to support it. But let us start with a transitional arrangement. There are viable roads in the country that we can start with. Let me start with Abuja, Kaduna, Kano. There is no reason why government should fund the reconstruction of this road. Millions of vehicles pass through this road every month, and the private sector can recover its investment immediately. Secondly, Mr. President, Lagos, Ibadan, it has been concession, but that concession was wrongly done. It was flawed. We all know that. If it's properly done, perhaps the investor might have recovered his money by now, and that road will be like any road in South Africa. Mr. President, Port Harcourt, Enugu is another viable road. Then we also have Enugu, Onitsha, through Oka. We have Ibadan, Ilorin, up to Java. We have Kano, Maiduguri. So all these roads are viable. I could recall, Mr. President, around 2006, the Obasanjo wanted to concession over, I think, 23 roads in the country. Somehow, the proposal could not scale through. But, Mr. President, it is now time to revisit that proposal. Mr. President, the sponsor of the bill made an allusion that we have 870 billion naira collected by PPPRA. Mr. President, as legislature, we have every right to ask where this money is. An act of National Assembly was passed, and as a result of that, the PPRA started collecting money from the public. This is public money. We have to ask where this 870 billion naira is. Yes. We are requesting for only 250 billion naira to add to the additional amount provided in the budget. We couldn't get it. We only got about 37 billion. 27 was proposed by the executive, 10 billion naira was given to the committee. We didn't know that we have well over 870 billion naira lying somewhere. Mr. Bassi, Senator Bassi, get us the facts. Perhaps we should invite the executive secretary of the PPRA to come and tell us what that money is. Mr. President, as I said earlier, not all roads can be concessioned to start with. Nigeria is a developing country. For a start, let us start with the roads that are viable, and let us do all we can to amend all the laws that are inhibiting investment in the road sector. We can invite the private sector to have a parley with them, and they will tell us what and what is required. Perhaps this can be done at the public hearing. So I support this bill, and I urge all my colleagues to do the same. It will bring a very big change. It will bring a revolution of the road sector in this country. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Mohamed Sani Musa, a revolution in the road sector.
Thank you, Mr. President. My name is Mohamed Sani Musa, representing Niger East Senatorial District. My distinguished colleagues, I think we must commend the mover of this bill, Senator Gershom Bassey, because I, for one, have a personal attachment with a bill like this. My late father-in-law was Director of Federal Highways, and I knew they've been moving for this Federal Roads Authority for a very long time, and it has not actualized. And then my second attachment to it is that my state, Niger State, has the largest number of federal high roads, network of roads. And I knew what Nigerians are facing, especially when they are going towards that end. The economic importance of roads can never be underestimated. All the advanced countries of the world today, if you see the road network they have, in fact, it contributes so much to the GDP of those countries. It is only in Nigeria today you will still see colonial roads. Roads that have been constructed almost 3 decades or 4 decades ago. Narrow bridges. In fact, some of the roads, if you go, you don't even see the bitumen on them. The asphalt is no longer there. And we don't even talk about the feeder roads. Today in advanced countries, what you see as highways here are feeder roads there. Our transporters do not go with the tonnage they're supposed to carry. There is nothing like gauges in our roads again. So I think this bill is very important, because what we need in this country is a road management system that will include not only seeing the road, but how are the roads designed? Most of our roads today that are being constructed, you will see that those roads that were even built during the colonial days are even stronger, because our engineers are very lazy. Our road engineers are very lazy. And what we see today on very high roads, especially during construction, you will see just a laborer from China with no qualification because of white skin. He is called an engineer in road construction. So I think our engineers also have to wake up to it. The budgetary and funding of our roads, we don't need government to be funding roads, just as earlier speakers have said. In everywhere today, the private sector drives the economy. Why must we be dependent on budgetary allocations for things like roads? Industrialization cannot happen without adequate road network. And every day we are talking about industrialization in this country. We just finished was it a bill or a motion on unemployment? The roads sector is enough to give enough employment to our youths. But we are not taking advantage of all these things. So the need for this bill is very important. The private sector must be allowed to drive this. The toll system is good. Why do we have to start reconstructing Abuja, Kano, start reconstructing Lagos, Kaduna, Lagos, Ibadan, or why don't we think of new road networks? If we have Lagos, existing Lagos to Abuja to Kano, why can't we start thinking of having another Abuja to Kano for another route, which will even shorten the distance? There have been some investors that have been trying to come into this sector, but they have been blocked. There are people that wanted to do super highways in Nigeria, from Lagos to Abuja, cutting almost 3 hours. It will bring you 4 hours from Lagos to Abuja. They have been discouraged. That is not a priority for this country. And we are talking about budget, so that we put money in Federal Ministry of Works and give contracts that are never done. I think it is high time we bring this bill, pass this bill, and also do our oversight to make sure that this bill see the light of the day. Mr. President, we still have narrow bridges, as I said. And some of these narrow bridges are still federal roads. They are there in my state. Are we going to continue like that? The only way out is for the private partnership. In this bill, we should make effort to allow the private sector to be the key movers of our roads. They should manage it. It should be an industry. It should be a business for some people, not contracts. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Oriolo Aderele Adeni.
Thank you, Mr. President, my distinguished colleagues. I would like to commend my chairman, distinguished Senator Bassi, who is the mover of this bill. I've been part of the bill from the conception up to date, and I want to commend him for pushing the bill to this particular stage. There is no doubt that in this country today, flying Nigeria road is the costliest in different forms. One, when you talk about the economic implication, you discover that a lot of income to the public, revenue to the government are being lost on our roads. When you consider the loss of goods and services, the delayed travel time that has resulted in economic loss of business or revenue to many people. Also, when you talk about the earth hazard, most of the earth hazard that is happening to people in this country is as a result of the bad road. When you travel maybe 20, 30 kilometers, by the time you get back to your place, you discover that you are in a total shape as far as your health is concerned. However, we are talking about financing road sector. I think the best model that is found in all parts of the world is what this, the proponent of this bill has put forward. However, in the bill, we have to emphasize one thing, because there are 3 types of maintenance. We have routine maintenance, periodic maintenance, and rehabilitation. In most cases in Nigeria, what we emphasize is periodic and rehabilitation. Whereas, if these routine maintenance are put in place, the roads will be attended to before they go too bad and the cost become too high. I want to cite an example I coordinated the Rural Access and Mobility Project for the state of Osun, which was supported, assisted by the World Bank Fund. We have art roads that we have constructed since 2011, and up to today, you can still discover that you don't have any pothole on that art roads. What is happening there is that we engage what we call them maintenance team. We engage people along the road corridor to look after the roads, and they are being paid about 20,000 per month per kilometer. And these roads, they are in good shape up to today. So I would like the bill to emphasize the usage of routine maintenance, the practice of routine maintenance, which we not only help our road to remain to have a longer lifespan, but it will also provide employment opportunity for our youths, and it will also encourage ownership by the people living along the road corridor. It will because this method we create a sort of enterprise on road sectors as we find it in other countries that have been mentioned here, including Malaysia, Peru, and all these Indian countries. So why I'm supporting the bill, I want us to emphasize in the bill that issue of routine maintenance should be part of what the authority should take as one of the key areas to be looked into. Thank you very much.
Senator Abraham Gobir.
Thank you very much, Your Excellency, distinguished colleagues. First, I would like to seize this opportunity to commend Gershon Bassi for this well-thought bill. And I also of the opinion that really there must be another source of funding for our roads, because currently we cannot be able to finance it. The roads are in dilapidated condition, and therefore there is need for us to find alternatives. And the simplest alternatives are actually to use the methods currently being used by Indians, South Africans, and maybe Americans, and of course the Dubai people. But of course you cannot do that until you are able to change some of the plate numbers you have. For example, in Dubai, by the time you pass through a radar, the plate number will be taken, and then the tax is going to be applied. Then you will see all of a sudden the meter will go off and it will go on. Then there is an increase of about 50 dirhams. Then in that case, you know for sure that automatically that has been added to your bill. But you cannot do that until you are able to check your plate numbers, where you will have your name, the address, and everything there included. Then on the other issue of, let's say, the roads, where, for example, Sani was saying that Nigerian engineers are lazy. With all sense of humility, Nigerian engineers are not lazy. But what is happening is that the funding is inadequate. So if you don't have the correct funding, there is no way you can be able to do things effectively as you should. And then, of course, you find that more than 50% of our roads in Nigeria, or even 70%, they are actually constructed by the foreigners. Some of them who are quacks, they are not even registered with Korea. So in that kind of situation, we cannot blame Nigerian engineers for that. So I think we have to look at this issue. Taxes must be there. Toll gates must come back. Because if we have toll gates, then in that case, we should be able to generate enough money to be able to reconstruct our roads. I think this one is very fundamental and important. Thank you very much.
Senator Abikule Amosu.
Thank you, Mr. President. Bikoli Amosun, I represent Ogun Central. Let me commend Senator Gerson Bassi for this bill. Mr. President, let me say that there will be no development in the absence of infrastructures. I've always argued that, and it's not just me, it is a common knowledge, that for any nation to be developed, the infrastructures must be in place. And one of the key infrastructures for any development, road, is a significant aspect of infrastructure. Mr. President, I've listened to many of my colleagues, and I totally agree with many of what they've put forward this afternoon. We cannot be doing the same thing all over and expect that we are going to get a different result. Mr. President, there is no way, and there is nowhere, anywhere in the world, that road will be funded solely by government. As a matter of fact, all the government need to do, just like we've been saying, is to create the enabling environment. I can even argue that, yes, maybe if they want to still be part of what is happening, they can keep some and use it to regulate. Mr. President, in a scenario where even as a state, if and when you put in about even half a trillion, that is 500 billion, it would just be about scratching the surface, really, in creating infrastructures. So, Mr. President, what I think we should do, it is exactly that what the government did with telecommunication. You will all agree with me. Times were when you have to know the exchange, the manager of your exchange. You will buy ladder, buy this, buy that, following them around for your telephone to work. Immediately the government did what they should do, bringing the private sector to drive it. Look at what is happening today. Yes, we are not where we should be, but clearly all of us will agree that we should even be asking ourselves, how have you been able to cope without the advent of mobile technology? That everybody now have mobile phones, even in our rural area. Whatever is happening now, we can be part of it. Our roads. We lack what we call maintenance culture. Even when all of these roads are built, when they are not maintained, clearly, of course, they will go bad. There are roads. I listened to some of my colleagues saying that even roads of 30 years, this, that. There are roads that even 60 years. But the truth is that they are being maintained. Routine, periodic, they are doing it every day. And we need to, without money, without getting the private sector to buy into this, there's nowhere where the government will have the money. Look at, there may be some strategic roads, because I remember, let me use about 3 roads from Ogun State, where I've had the privilege and opportunity to govern our people. I applied severally to the then President Goodluck Jonathan that they should seed that Lagos-Ibadan Express Road, that it will be done. Within 2-3 years, it will be fixed. Of course, they came back to say that for security reasons, that road is so strategic that they cannot allow a state to administer it. Yes, I agree. But the right thing they should have done is to now supervise and superintend and get private sector to buy in. Somehow the thing failed. They concessioned the road, and I don't know what went wrong. There are a lot of things that we must do, and as government, we will not be able to do that. Even when these roads are built, you will build a road that is for maybe 40 tons, or maybe maximum 30 tons. And you will see people bringing in 45 tons, 50 tonner on those roads. Then clearly, what do you think will happen? Of course, it will be spoiled. we cannot overemphasize the strategic importance of having a good road. Mr. President, 3 days ago, I left Abeokuta very early in the morning, around 6 a.m. to make sure that I get to Lagos in time. I did not get to Lagos until 3.5 hours because the roads are not good. They said they are maintaining the road, they are repairing it. 3.5 hours. A road that ordinarily should just take me 50-something minutes or maybe maximum 1 hour. I spent 3.5 hours on that road. Just look at the security implication of that. Look at the economic implication of that. Of course, look at even the health hazard of somebody even driving for 3.5 hours. Majority of these people driving, they do not even have even air condition or anything. They are suffering. So, Mr. President, for us to get this thing right, we need to do one or two things. One, we should reassure ourselves and reassure the executive arm of government to let them know that there is no way they will get the resources to fix all these our roads. They can take some strategic roads, maybe one or two in each state, because they argue that for security implication, for security reasons, some roads are too strategic to be left in the hands of states. If they take those roads and they focus on those roads, maybe they should cede roads to states. When you write to federal government that you want to take over this road, 18 months they have not replied you. So what happens? You have to go ahead and fix the road yourself. If they cede roads to states, states will get private sector to come and partner with them. And I'm sure by the time they do that, our people are not averse to paying. No, they're not. And I believe that we should hit the rich hard. Of course, you take from the rich and give to those that are not that rich. We can't do that in all of these countries. When you are driving, just your plate number, just like what Senator Goje said. It tells you the quality of the car, the caliber of the car, the make, and they will charge you accordingly. Even when you bring all this car in, they can begin to say, oh, you want to ride the Rolls Royce, you want to ride the whatever, they will pay more for it. And once that is done, we'll get the necessary wherewithal to fix all this road. So, Mr. President, finally, I want to say that what we should do is to encourage the private sector to buy in. Look at, when you are in London now, you see several of these A4 OCs, North Circular, South Circular. We can't do that here. When we were here in 2003, to get to the airport from here, sometimes 2 hours, 3 hours. But today, because the road is fixed, you will just get to the airport 35 minutes, 40 minutes. What does that tell us? It tells us that when the roads are fixed, they will take care of a lot of things. It will improve us economically, it will improve us socially, it will improve us, even the way we work. We will work smart, we will think smart if we have all this infrastructure in place. So, Mr. President, on this note, I want to commend Senator Bassi for this initiative. This is the way to go. Without towing this line, we will continue, of course, to move in circles and nothing will be achieved. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator Olubunmi Adetunbi.
Thank you, Mr. President. Adetunbi, Ekiti North. I'd like to deviate a bit from the excellent commentary of my colleagues on the importance of this bill, which I wholly support, and I think I will enjoin our colleagues to give it the maximum attention. Our country is currently challenged by a slow-growing economy that is growing at about 2%, and in some cases, less than 2%. In actual fact, it has undergone a series of recession in the last few years. And our pursuit for double-digit growth is a concern to every member of this government in ensuring that we generate growth that give jobs and income to our people. But the paradox of Nigeria, Mr. President, is that the construction sector, particularly the road construction subsector, has one of the highest potential for job creation and economic growth. Yet, the road management model that we are pursuing is limiting that sector from making optimum contribution to the economy. And this raises a fundamental question of, really speaking, how much burden can the federal government carry in a federation of this size? The question of the exclusive list of responsibility that is currently belonging to the federal government, including certain roads that have long qualified for, release to subnational governments, is a major burden. Niger State just talked about the highest concentration of federal roads. Maybe at the time those roads were federalized, it made sense. But maybe now, it no longer makes sense. And I think this is an issue that we need to underscore. The whole global experience is beginning to see further and further responsibility ceded to subnationals in a federation. For Nigeria, it seems to be so difficult for us to even engage the debate, not to talk of getting it done. The federal government is too responsibility heavy for its capacity and the resources that is available to it. And it's creating less incentive for economic competition within subnational governments. Because every state of this federation wants to have a piece of the action. Mr. President, it will surprise all of us here that a lot of establish this institution, establish this university, establish this college of education in our respective district is still that mentality that let us get our own from the federal government. The question is, from what resource? From what resource are we going to fund all of this? We can't even fund roads. The federal government cannot fund its roads, and yet we are making demand for new institutions, new economic assets that will require the federal government to write the check. From where? Where is the treasury that this money is going to come from? Mr. President, please permit me to say this. We should worry about the sociology of the Nigerian state that makes it possible for models not to work. Senator Barrow, my good friend, talked about the old model of roads and that we need to adopt the new model. Concessioning. Why did the concessioning of Lagos-Ibadan fail? Why did it fail in this environment? And it worked in South Africa, in Morocco, and Malaysia, as a distinguished senator said, the chairman of Works. Mr. President, the truth of the matter is that those countries are countries of rules. Why do rules fail in Nigeria? The FEMA law, the FEMA Act says 5% of petroleum pump price should be remitted to FEMA. That law has been ignored with impunity. Nothing happened. No consequence. And therefore, there is no incentive for obeying laws in our country. This thing that we are talking about, this road authority, I assume and I pray that it will be passed. The question is, will it be obeyed? Because a preceding law is now being annulled because of lack of obedience to that law. And there's no consequence. The pricing template of PPPRA excludes FEMA. The joint committee you asked us, this chamber asked us to investigate this matter. We prevailed on PPPRA to even speak to their inability to obey this law. We've reached a brick wall. What's going on, Mr. President? We need to ask these questions because we cannot continue to pass laws that are not obeyed. We cannot continue to, declare resolutions that are not respected. And as a parliament, I think something needs to be done. I so submit.
Senator Smartademi.
Well, Mr. President, I want to commend the speakers on this issue. I support this bill, but there's one aspect which I will probably, Mr. President, digress a bit. In digressing, I will just want to highlight what I perceive to be problems and solutions. Why is it that the concessions are not working? Why is it not working in Nigeria? If it has worked in other countries, it's not working in Nigeria because of corruption. Why are the roads failing? Corruption. Roads are supposed to be constructed with specification to the thickness of the asphalt. Engineers will compromise, tell the contractors, give us 30 mm instead of 50 mm. Where roads are supposed to have stone base, engineers will say, do stone base halfway. The others, don't worry, they collect the money. Most of the buildings you see here in Abuja, they are owned by engineers who were involved in the construction of Abuja. So when people talk about...
I will advise that you be careful with these allegations. Okay.
Because of corruption. Why is it that you have more of the Asians in Nigeria? Because the rate of construction in Nigeria is higher than other African countries. We have stones in Nigeria, we have water, we are not importing them, we have bitumen, but our rate is higher than other countries in Africa. And that explains why today you see the Asians in our countries. So when people talk about problems, I mean, so if you are providing solutions, you must look at what are the problems. The bottom line in Nigeria is corruption. The roads are not done to specification, the rate is higher. Now, when you want to construct 100 kilometers of road in Nigeria, go to Ghana and find out how much will it cost to construct the same terrain with Ghana. You see, Nigeria is 3 times the cost. So the bottom line of the problem is simply corruption. There's no other solution to it. No matter the law you put in place, as long as corruption persists, nothing will work in Nigeria. So this is the bottom line. My colleague is out, he was talking about the engineers, and I was telling him, I said, yes, don't blame the engineers, but you blame the fact that they are involved in corruption. I mean, simply put, because when roads are constructed, or when you have specification as to the quality of the road you require for the contractors, the engineers will compromise with the contractors. Have you observed that when you travel along Nigerian major highways, when you are approaching communities, cities, the roads are good. But when you move some kilometers outside communities in Nigeria, the roads are bad. Because the minister, the governors, when they are inspecting, they will inspect within the communities where they be appreciated. So the engineers are aware of that. So they tell the contractors, when you are moving out, they start reducing the quantity of the material to be used. So nobody is there to see that those quantities, those quantities were actually used or not used. So these are the problems. So until we address the issue of corruption as it affects road construction, good as this bill is, what will affect this bill is if efforts are not put in place to check the system. So my submission is very simple. Good as this bill is, I support it, it's long overdue. The problem of Nigerian roads, the problem of concessions of projects is simply put corruption. So we appeal to Nigerian engineers to make sure roads are done to specification. I'm happy you are here. Yes.
Thank you very much. Distinguished colleagues. Okay, you want to speak? Okay.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think this is one of those very important 9 Senates that has drawn the attention of almost everybody here today. And I don't want to repeat what my colleagues have already said, but I want to point out 2 issues, Mr. President, in the contribution to this second reading of this bill, and that is the funding. The problem of FEMA in the implementation of its mandate is a result of a poor funding, and that comes from the inability of the Petroleum Products Pricing Regulatory Agency fulfilling its own obligation as stipulated by law. Now, Mr. President, instead of just like the Committee on Downstream and the FEMA has been inviting them for a series of meetings to find out why the 5% was not paid or how it developed wings and flew away, I am of the opinion that in this amendment we are doing, that we should we will change our tactics. And the change of tactics that I'm advocating here is that this money should be collected as source It should not hit the account of PPRA before going to FEMA. So we will devise a means that this money will just from source. If PPRA is picking their own money, picking their own proceeds from the money they collect on behalf of all of us, this 5% will automatically just hit the account of FEMA. That's one. The second issue is if we decide to concession the roads when this bill is through, and we want to bring the private sector as advocated, I'm of the opinion that the major busy trunk A roads should be taken over by business entities so that they can manage and do the roads and then get their money back. But the rural roads that are less busy, that are not applied, that are not economically viable for such people to take over, should be done by the federal government. Federal government should take over those ones that get to the hinterlands, that get to farmlands and all that. So those ones that are in this area should be taken by federal government and states. Then the major ones, like Lagos Ibadan, the Onitsha Benin, Onitsha Lagos axis, Port Harcourt, Enugu, and all that. Those major ones that you have traffic, where the private sector can recover their money, should be taken by the private sector. Those ones that are from the area that are not economical, if we do that, Mr. President, it will help to make sure that is more fast. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Senator Kabir Barki, I called you while you were absent. Would you like to contribute?
Thank you, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues. Let me first of all commend the presenter of this very, very important bill. Of course, we know the importance of roads in this country. Mr. President, I have this to add. The main problem we have in this country is road sector is not under one umbrella. For example, Federal Ministry of Works, Highway Department, in charge of construction, reconstruction, rehabilitation. FEMA is in charge of maintenance. RSDT, that's the road sector development team, in charge of also rehabilitation. And we have also construction department in charge of road construction. So all these are, sectors under, road sectors. They're supposed to be under one umbrella. Because of course, if all these ones are under one umbrella, that's the Federal Road Authority. I'm sure something better will come up. Because yes, there's no harmonization. You will see at times, like for example, like during the budget defense, you will see Federal Ministry of Works awarded a road, maybe rehabilitating it. And also FEMA awarded that same road. So if, for example, now there's no harmonization, maybe FEMA will start the work, and then all of a sudden again you see Federal Ministry of Works contractors mobilizing into that road. We have similar cases, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues. So by the time at least we have this Federal Road Authority, it means all these sectors will be harmonized under one umbrella. And the most important thing is funding, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues. Of course, if we have many of our colleagues talk, there is of course this amended act of FEMA, 5% user charges and vehicle transit charge, of which up to now, FOBO is not realized. And this, of course, laws were there, at least the amended act was assented since 2009. So definitely something has to be done. So this Federal Road Authority at least would be a good umbrella of which all this road sector will be. And another thing, Mr. President, after maybe this Federal Road Authority, just like similar authorities in the country, just mentioned maybe like Ghana, South Africa, they have also this Federal Road Board, of which, yes, this board also is responsible for getting money for at least construction, reconstruction, rehabilitation, maintenance of all our roads. So, but we don't have that one, Mr. President. Now our road sector only depends on budgetary allocation. And I'm sure the budgetary allocation is not enough. Many of our colleagues talk. So therefore, we have to establish this authority and also follow it up with this federal board, federal fourth bank, and that will get money for the road sector, so that of course we will have very good roads. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, distinguished Senator Kabir Barkia. I deliberately returned to ask you for contribution because you are one-time MD FEMA. And of course, your experience will also guide us in this. Distinguished colleagues, before I put the question, I want to know if there is anybody who wants to make a contribution on this. All right, so I'll put the question. Those in favor that this bill be now read a second time, say aye. Those against, say nay. The ayes have it. Clerk of the Senate.
Mr. President, distinguished senators, a bill for an act to repeal the Federal Road Maintenance Agency Act 2002 as amended, the Federal Highway Act 1971, and the Control of Advertisement Act 1986, and to establish the Federal Road Authority to provide for the ownership, regulation, management, and development of the Federal Road Network and for matters connected therewith, 2019, second reading.
A bill for an act to repeal the Federal Roads Maintenance Agency Act 2002 as amended, the Federal Highways Act 1971 and the Control of Advertisement Act 1986, and to establish the Federal Roads Authority to provide for the ownership, regulation, management, and development of the Federal Roads Network and for other matters connected there with 2019 second reading taken, and the bill is referred to the Senate Committee on Works to report back within 4 weeks. Distinguished colleagues, let me thank everyone for the various interventions, and I want to emphasize that truly the government alone cannot fund the reconstruction or construction of roads across the country. We just have to work towards what is working in most countries, that it is either BOT or PPPP. And of course, even within Africa, this has been working. And I want to also agree with Senator Smata Demi to some extent that corruption is also responsible for some of the challenges we face in our red sector. We recall that privatization of various federal government enterprises were made, in fact, right from 1986 to date. And in most cases, the privatization or concessioning processes were flawed. And of course, we suffer as a country. So it's the same thing. We just have to be very careful. We insist we go on BOT, the bill operate transfer, or the public-private partnership. But we have to ensure that everything is done within the law as is required, so that no one takes advantage of his position in government to change the entire people of the country. I believe that we need to push also to find out what happened to the over 800 billion naira that PPPRA was alleged to have collected. I think that we'll take that as a separate issue, because we need to verify, we need to confirm, even for the sake of maybe allowing PRA to defend itself, because this is not something we can simply sweep under the carpet. 800 billion can do a lot of things for our country. Thank you very much. Leader of the Senate.
Thank you, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues. The seventh order of the day is the second reading of the Constituency Project Budgetary Provision Bill 2019. Distinguished senators will recall that the bill was read the first time in this chamber on Tuesday, 19th November 2019. Mr. President, you may wish to invite distinguished Senator Odua Stella Adaize, Princess, to move the motion for the bill to be read a second time.
Distinguished Senator Stella Adaize, Odua.
Thank you, Mr. President. Dear colleagues, my name is Stella Adaize Odua. I'm the senator representing Anambra North. Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, permit me to lead the debate of this important bill, which seeks to grant legal backing to the provision of constituency projects in annual budgets of the Federation by a minimum of 20%. Mr. President, the bill was read for the first time on the floor of the Senate on Tuesday, 19th November 2019. Mr. President, dear colleagues, one of the unique features of our democratic journey so far is the concept of constituency projects. Available statistics shows that 70% of Nigerians live in rural areas, and the intention of the bill is to ensure that good governance is delivered to these crucial areas. The bill is also intended to correct the top-bottom approach of governance and replace it with the bottom-up approach. Mr. President, dear colleagues, constituency projects in recent time is one of the ways to attract federal presence to our people. If not for these federal projects, majority of federal constituency will not have a single federal project due to lopsided nature of project allocation in the budget. The constituency project is not peculiar to Nigeria alone. There are similar mechanisms in other developing countries. For instance, the Constituency Development Fund has been institutionalized in Kenya, Uganda, India, and Tanzania. Instead of vilifying the National Assembly on the constituency project, we should advocate for institutional framework for the implementation of the constituency project as it is in the case of Kenya. The bill, therefore, is an attempt at providing both institutional and legislative framework for the operation of constituency projects in Nigeria, thereby making it part of our national budget. While it is true that local government council has the responsibility of the development of local communities, the federal government has the overall responsibility of providing federal presence in these areas through developmental projects. And there is no way this can be achieved without input of parliamentarians who are the representatives of the people at the federal level. Mr. President, my respected colleagues, by doing so, parliamentarians who know the needs of the people will articulate them in form of projects for injection into the budget in form of constituency projects. Mr. President, the most interesting thing about this constituency project bill includes, number one, projects under this act, when passed, shall be community-based in order to ensure that prospective benefits are available to widespread cross-section of the inhabitants of a particular area. Number two, any funding under this act shall be for complete projects or a defined phase of a project and may include the acquisition of land and buildings. The third one is that all projects shall project as defined under this act when passed and may include costs related to feasibility studies, planning and design, or other technical inputs for the project, but shall not include recurrent costs of a facility. Number four, projects may include the acquisition of vehicles, machineries, and equipment for the constituency. Most legislators, Mr. President, around the world angle for such projects such that they can appeal to the voters in their constituents, since they seek votes just as executives does. In most democracies, Mr. President, it is a process used to obtain funding from a central government to finance projects befitting the legislator's local constituents. It is also known as earmarking or pork kernel in US. Constituency projects shall constitute 20% of our annual budget by ensuring that certain portion of the nation's annual budget be set aside for rural development. Mr. President, my dear colleagues, the Greek philosopher Aristotle averred that the state exists for the greater good of humanity. Democracy, on the other hand, gives people the opportunity to determine how they are governed. Naturally, therefore, the electorate looks up to the government for democracy dividends. The National Assembly, in response to the yearning of their constituents for development and federal presence, demanded and got the constituency projects approved. We must therefore seek for ways of institutionalizing it, and that is what the bill seeks to provide. Mr. President, my dear colleagues, since the inception of constituency projects in Nigeria, there have been many misconceptions and misinterpretations and other judgments of constituency project administration. This, and indeed some other factors, have painted the hallowed chambers of National Assembly in a very bad light. It is instructive to know, by way of educating the general public, that members of National Assembly merely identify the needs of the constituents and recommend same to the executives during budgeting. Ultimately, they have no direct control over the implementation nor the award, neither financing or supervision of constituency projects. All these are done by appropriate agencies other than National Assembly. This bill, therefore, is an attempt to give constituency projects a legislative framework to ensure that all the controversies surrounding the issue is cleared. I therefore urge my colleagues to support this bill and to ensure that we all push it to the extent that it's passed into law. Making this work is to the benefit of our people. Mr. President, I want to make a comment before I sit down. This constituency project, Mr. President, I'm very particular about it, and I think most of us are. Mine in particular is that for constituents such as mine, the fact that we have lights or road or any of the amenities, and indeed that the schools have the school facilities, is because of constituency projects. If we fail to institutionalize it, if we fail to provide the necessary framework, the legal framework to sustain it, constituencies such as mine, rural constituencies, will not be able to have the necessary developments, and neither would they participate in the developmental programs that comes to Nigeria. There are places in my constituency as we speak where children have to walk for 5 kilometers before they can access school. There are still places where transformer electricity is a luxury, and the only way they can have those luxuries that are supposed to be basic requirement is through constituency projects. I urge my dear colleagues to please support the accelerated passage of this bill I so submit.
Deputy Chief Whip. Deputy Chief Whip.
Thank you, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues. I want to second and support that this bill be read the second time. And in doing so, Mr. President, let me say that the subject of the bill is one that definitely requires not just our action, but intervention in this manner at this time. Like the lead debater said, there are a lot of misinterpretations, misinformation, and even disinformations out there. And it is very obvious that if we are to look at the intent of the Nigerian Constitution that says we must act in a manner that gives every constituent part of this country a sense of belonging and that national feeling, then you agree with me that, of course, it is only through the instrumentality of the constituency project that every constituent part of Nigeria is getting, no matter how little, something that comes from the federal government. And I think if this is the intendment, then it is a responsibility on our own part to try to work to ensure that those misinterpretations are removed. And this bill seeks to do just that. I believe sincerely, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, that these little projects, because some analysts have said they are little projects and they are distorting, I don't see so, because when we go to ask for votes during election, we go to polling units that are located in the remotest area, and they also go in to go and cast their vote, just that one vote that anybody in any part of this country is entitled to. I think it is only very fair that we try to ensure that every part of this country have that sense of belonging by getting those little interventions as democratic dividends. And so, within this context, to have something institutionalized in a manner that sends clarity, that sends continuity, and to ensure that these projects are properly placed, the idea of getting it from bottom up is what we have actually been doing, because when you go to campaign, you get a list of problems. And I think it's only a bad politician that will come when you have this opportunity to say that you want to ignore those little things that your people actually told you they are interested in. So, Mr. President, distinguished colleagues, as straightforward as this seems, to me, I think it's a very important thing that we should work very hard on. Let's all look at it, particularly when we look at the content of the bill, when we look at exactly the provisions, to ensure that we have those things that can make the idea of constituency project to truly serve that thing that this night Senate have said, a Senate that works for Nigerians, a parliament that works for Nigerians, so that through this we are able to achieve that. Thank you for this opportunity.
Is there anybody against the bill? I think this is a very straightforward bill. Okay, I'll put the question. Those in favor that this bill be now read a second time, say aye. Those against, say nay. The ayes have it. Clerk of the Senate.
Mr. President, distinguished senators, the bill for an act to provide for constituency projects in the annual budget of the Federation and for other matters connected therewith, 2019, second reading.
A bill for an act to provide for constituency projects in the annual budget of the Federation and for other matters connected therewith, 2019, second reading taken, and the bill is referred to the Senate Committee on Finance to report back within 4 weeks. Thank you very much, distinguished colleagues. Leader of the Senate.
Point of order. I want to come under order 13,
Mr. President, which will allow us to extend this session between the normal 2 hours.
No, leader, we are not extending time. Everybody, the time has passed. It's supposed to be 1:45 when you raise the point of order. Leader, please allow us to take the next motion and then we close.
Beyond that,
how do you know? I'm the one to regulate it.
Thank you, Mr. President. I recognize the mood. Where do we stop? Mr. President, the eighth order of the day is a motion standing in the name of the Distinguished Senator Olalekan Ramoni Mustafa and 10 others on the urgent need to investigate the breach of Nigerian laws by foreign vessels in coastal shipping of petroleum products in downstream sector of the Nigerian maritime industry. Mr. President, you may wish to invite Senator Mustafa Olalekan Ramoni to move the motion.
This motion is hot. We have the Senator Lekon Mustafa.
Thank you, Mr. President. Olalekan Mustafa, Ogun East. Urgent need to investigate the breach of Nigerian laws by foreign vessels in coastal shipping of petroleum products in the downstream sector of the Nigerian maritime industry. The Senate notes that the Nigerian Content NOGICD Act 2010 was enacted to promote value addition to the national economy by stimulating growth and industrial development in the oil and gas sector of the economy. Aware that Section 105 of the NOGICD Act grants powers of enforcement to both the Nigerian Content Development and Monitoring Board and Nigerian Maritime Administration and Safety, NIMASA, as matters pertaining to Nigerian content development in the coastal and inland shipping sector of the maritime industry. Worried that the influx of foreign vessels into Nigerian downstream sector is alarming against the Coastal and Inland Shipping Cabotage Act 2003, which clearly restricts vessels engaged in domestic coastal trade such that only wholly owned, manned and registered Nigerian vessels can engage in the domestic coastal carriage of petroleum products within the coastal, territorial and inland waterways of Nigeria. Further aware that over the past 15 years, indigenous tonnage capacity and coastal shipping capabilities have grown remarkably with Nigerian operators owning multiple tanker vessels in their fleet. Note that the NNPC is the largest employer of downstream shipping services in Africa on account of 1. Direct sale of crude oil and direct purchase of petroleum products, DSDP fuel import contract. 2. Coastal and bunkering vessels service contracts for midstream transfer and coastal shipping of imported petroleum products to in-country depots and tank farms. Notwithstanding these activities and the numerous opportunities generated therein, the indigenous capacity and capabilities have not been enhanced. Also note that the capital freight spent by NNPC through direct sales of crude oil and direct purchase of petroleum products is approximately $60 million monthly, which amounts to about $720 million annually. Aware that the value of DSDP for 2019/2020 contract period is at the range of about $900 million, $0.9 billion, out of which foreign ship owners amount for nearly 100% of freight spent associated with this downstream activity, most of which is repatriated overseas to the detriment of the Nigerian economy. And regrets that lack of contract of carriage and the absence of guaranteed cargo tonnage in the maritime industries have led to the significant losses and collapse of domestic and indigenous shipping. I want the Senate to accordingly resolve: 1. Mandate the Committee on Local Content and Petroleum Downstream to carry out an investigation with a view to unraveling the influx of foreign vessels in the coastal region and the level of patronage of Nigerian shipping companies. 2, investigate the flagrant abuse of the NOGICD Act 2010 and the Cabotage Act 2003 respectively by the operators and stakeholders in the maritime industry through ship-to-ship transfer with coastal foreign vessels. Number 3, investigate foreign ship owners involved in freights associated with downstream activities to the detriment of the local economy or patronage. And number 4, mandate the Committee on Local Content and Downstream to investigate the reasons for the dominance of foreign vessels above locally owned, manned and registered vessels in the domestic carriage of petroleum products within the coastal territory and inland waterways of Nigeria. And number 5, investigate the actions of the Nigerian National Petroleum Company in ensuring participation of indigenous companies in the freight of petroleum products in line with the provisions of the Presidential Executive Order 5, 2018. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much, distinguished Leko Mustafa. Very distinguished Senator Ibikunle Amosu.
Thank you, Mr. President Ibikunle Amosu. I represent Ogun Central. Mr. President, let me commend Senator Mustafa for this motion, and let me, in seconding this motion, urge my colleagues to support this very important motion for just few reasons. One, they should check capital flights. It will support capacity building initiative. It will create employment for our people, and it will help in transferring technology. We are complaining that we don't have, we need revenue, and this is a very good opportunity for us to look into those revenue that are being lost on a daily basis. So, Mr. President, I want to wholeheartedly support this motion, and I think the appropriate committee should be quickly saddled with the responsibility of funding and dwelling on this. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you very much. Senator Surajuddin Basiru Ajibola.
Thank you, Mr. President. Distinguished colleagues, I also support the expeditious approval of this motion. Nigeria is a maritime state, and one of the benefits of being a maritime state is to have the necessary capacity in the industry to be able to tap the resources of that God-endowed resources of being a maritime state. And secondly, too, in terms of technology, there's a need for Nigerians to be actively involved in that particular importance area, particularly as relates the oil and gas sector and also the maritime industry. I remember very well that when the capital...
Distinguished, we have very limited time, so maybe you just round up. Round up.
I've round up to say that I urge us to adopt the motion and, of course, consider the prayers, which are very, very germane and will help in accelerating economic development as relate to our condition as a maritime state and also our oil-producing state. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Distinguished colleagues, will go to the prayers. Prayer 1. Mandate the committees for local content and petroleum downstream to carry out an investigation with a view to unraveling the influx of foreign vessels in the coastal region and the level of patronage of Nigerian shipping companies. Those in favor of prayer 1 say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Prayer 2. Investigate the flagrant abuse of the NOGCID CD Act 2010 and Cabotage Act 2003, respectively, by the operators and stakeholders in the maritime industry through ship-to-ship transfer with coastal foreign vessel. Those in favor of this prayer say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Prayer 3. Investigate foreign ship owners of freight associated with downstream activities repatriated overseas by NNPC to the detriment of the local company, local economy or patronage. Those in favor of this prayer say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Prayer 4. Mandate the Committee on Local Content to investigate the reasons for the dominance of foreign vessels above locally owned, manned and registered vessels in the domestic carriage of petroleum products within the coastal territory and inland waterways of Nigeria. Those in favor of prayer 4 say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. And prayer 5, investigate the actions of the Nigerian National Petroleum Company in ensuring participation of indigenous companies in the freight of petroleum products in line with provisions of Presidential Executive Order 5, 2018. Those in favor of this prayer say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Thank you very much. Leader of the Senate. Additional prayer.
Mr. President, dear colleagues, sorry to take your time, but the essence of this bill and the non-compliance of it is not...
What is the additional prayer?
Really the issue, Mr. President.
Any seconder? Senator, no. Senator Babaketa, you can go back to your seat. The single Senator Payemi.
Well, Mr. President, Michael Okwemi by Midele Ekiti Central, I rise to second the motion as ably moved by distinguished Senator Stella Odwa.
Those in favor of the additional prayer moved by Senator Stella Odwa and seconded by Senator Michael Bamidele Openi say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Leader of the Senate.
Mr. President, my highly respected and distinguished colleagues, I haven't come to the statutory period of our concluding accordance with Rule 13 of our rules. I move that the Senate adjourn and...
No, we'll stand down. The remaining items on the order paper. Minority Leader.
I so second.
Distinguished colleagues, those in favor of the motion say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. Leader of the Senate.
President, having come to the end of today's deliberations, I move that the Senate adjourn deliberations until Thursday, the 12th of December 2019 at 10 a.m. prompt. I so move.
Minority Leader.
Thank you, Mr. President. I so second that the Senate do adjourn till Thursday, the 12th of December 2019.
Distinguished colleagues, before I put the question, I have an announcement to make. Announcement. The Christian Legislators Fellowship of the National Assembly, Abuja, will hold their 2019 Christmas Carol tomorrow, 12 December 2019, at Senate Committee Room 0.22, Senate New Building by 3 p.m. prompt. Theme, oh, come, let us adore him. Announcer, President, Christian Legislators Fellowship of the National Assembly. Distinguished colleagues, those in favor that the Senate do adjourn till tomorrow, Thursday, the 12th day of December 2019 at 10 a.m. prompt say aye. Those against say nay. The ayes have it. The Senate is hereby adjourned till tomorrow, Thursday, 12th day of December 2019 at 10 a.m. prompt.